Yo, Shortbox Nation, this is Botter, and I'm here to tell you right now that con season starts early this year with the return of Northeast Florida's premier anime, comic book, and sci-fi event, Collective Con. That's right, Northeast Florida's largest pop culture convention returns for its 10th year on March 8th through the 10th at the Prime Osborne Center in Jacksonville, Florida. 10 years of Collective Con, they're pulling all the stops out to make sure this is a can't-miss event. And the guest list they got going, don't even get me started on the guest list. I mean, they've got A-list celebrity guests and voice actors from some of your favorite movies, anime, and video games like Elijah Wood and Sean Ashton, Ray Park, Trisha Helfer, Ross Marquand, Max Middleman, and Bo-Katan herself will be there, Katie Sackhoff. Tell me what other convention is giving you the opportunity to meet Frodo and Sam from Lord of the Rings, Darth Maul, and One Punch Man all under the same roof. Only at Collective Con. And if you're looking to get some of your favorite comics signed, or if you want to get an original sketch from some of the best comic artists in the world, well, you're in luck, because there'll be plenty of comic and creator guests there, like DC comic artist extraordinaire Clay Mann, Harvey Award-nominated illustrator John Taylor Christopher, Marvel and DC cover artist Chris Stevens, and acclaimed Star Wars author Timothy Zahn. They'll all be at Collective Con this year. And if you're looking to bring the family, or if you want to make a weekend out of it, you're in luck, because there'll be so much going on at Collective Con that weekend in the form of vendors, fan panels, video game tournaments, cosplay contests, after parties, and a bunch of fan events. You can purchase single and 3-day weekend passes now using the link in this episode's show notes, or by going to collectivecon.com to book your tickets and hotel. Buy your tickets now, and I'll see you at Collective Con, March 8th through the 10th. Now let's start the show.
Will Eisner is the subject of this artist's spotlight, and he saw himself as a graphic witness reporting on life, death, heartbreak, and the never-ending struggle to prevail. In no better way are all of these themes commingled than in Will Eisner's A Contract with God. In the aptly titled A Contract with God, it's Depression-era New York, and a pious Jew loses his beloved daughter. The man's name is Freme Hirsch, and he had a contract with God, one that he had adhered to most of his life.
Mr. Hirsch, I'm sorry she's gone. I'm sorry, but your daughter is dead.
No, do you hear me? No. No, not to me. Not to me. No. You can't. We had a contract. You violated our contract. You violated our contract. If God requires that men honor their agreements, then is not God also so obligated? Enough!
He breaks his contract with his maker and ends up as a slumlord. This is just one of many stories that ushered in the beginning of the graphic novel. He's been called the John Steinbeck of comics, and most of his body of work has been declared as a masterpiece. If you listen, you can hear the streets calling his name. The Shortbox proudly presents the literary legacy of Will Eisner.
The mood is set.
Yeah.
The mood. Gonna pass those tissues.
So, I mean, the man was definitely prolific, right?
Yeah.
He had a lot to say and could use his any medium, really. Pencils, pens, ink, paint, anything to be like a swordsman, dude. Just to cut straight to your heart, whether it's with a laugh or with a sad story. So,
well said, C. Let's just roll into it, man. Shortbox Nation, welcome to a very somber episode 273. I'm your host, Botter Milligan. I am fortunate enough to be joined by some of the best co-hosts in the podcast game. I got my right-hand man, Cesar Cordero.
Happy New Year, guys.
Happy New Year, brother. We got Ashley Lanny Hoy with us.
Hey, guys.
And Edmund Danzart.
Yo.
I want to go ahead and say that intro that you heard was done solely by Cesar Cordero. Beautiful intro, bro. You just keep getting better with these.
Thank you, man. This one was difficult, and I know it's a big bummer. That said, it was necessary. Ashley and I were kind of talking ahead of time because, like we were talking, oddly enough, Will Eisner's work when he when it was like crime stories and sort of like high-paced, intense detective tales weren't really as gritty or dark as they should be, as more or less some of the tales that reflected life in some of his comics, like A Contract with God or Dropsie Avenue. So there was a part of me that was like, I can't really hyper stylize this. I have to do it as the comic is, and it was hard. It was very hard, and it was not fun. But the next sort of interlude that we do, I think you'll see there'll be a little more little levity and
Will Eisner had
levity
range.
and brevity to it.
Will Eisner had range. The range, man. The range.
Yeah.
And look, if you are a new listener joining the Shortbox Nation and family for the first time, you've chosen a very good episode to start out with. I mean, this is definitely our last episode of 2019, and we wanted to go out with a bang and do one more artist spotlight episode. For those of you unfamiliar, our artist spotlight episodes, which arguably, in my opinion, might be some of our best episodes. I think we all put our best foot forward, and the production's always on point. This is, man, I don't even know, maybe our 9th or 10th artist spotlight, but it's among a library of really good artist spotlight episodes, such as the focus, the episodes we've done on Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, Mike Mignola, Akira Toriyama. I think this year we did, I know we did Todd McFarlane, and I think we did Alex Ross prior to that, but don't quote me. But these episodes are meant for us to do a deep dive into one artist. Lately, we've been letting our Shortbox Patreon members in the True Believer tier, I believe, vote for these episodes. So this episode was voted and in part brought to you by our Shortbox patrons. As Cesar, which you might have already gleaned so far, we are focusing on, man, the legend. I'm just going to say the legend, Will Eisner, for this episode.
Oh, yeah.
Writer, comic book artist, editor, colorist. I mean, overall businessman. I think I texted C yesterday, doing a deep dive into, and when I say research, like, this might have been the most involved research. This dude's life, man, from 1936 all the way to his passing in 2005. He's done more than enough for like 2 lifetimes.
It's easy to say that he's done more than that, right? But like, why did you feel you needed to do that deep dive into the research?
Because I think Will Eisner's name has always just been associated with like this sense of like you know how we always talk about like treating comic books as an art form and just something really serious.
Yeah, in literature.
In literature, like, I wanted to make sure that I did the proper research to pay respect to this dude, man. And prior to this episode, and I'm sure a lot of folks listening might not be familiar with like what he's contributed to comic books, both like in front and behind the scenes as well.
Well, let's not forget this was Ashley's idea. Like, she threw the name in the hat initially. Do you remember that?
You did.
Yeah, because I wrote it down.
You were like, you were like Will Eisner, and I'm like, boop, my eyes got super wide. I was like, what?
Yeah. So we got it, and unfortunately, the patrons were interested enough to vote and pick this one out. So, but before we go into any deeper about Will Eisner, I did have some house clean items I want to get out the way. So speaking about Patreon, we do have a new patron that just joined the group, friendly neighborhood nerd, the Bobo, a.k.a. Robert
Bobo.
Griffin. Yeah, Bobo.
Yeah.
Just became a Shortbox patron, so round of applause.
Congratulations, man.
Patrons. Welcome to the family, Bobo. So We've got that. And speaking about the topic of Patreon, I want to go and actually shout out to all of our patrons, man, and future patrons. We launched a Patreon this year in May, and we've definitely grown in size. So I want to thank all of those folks that decided to contribute and support the podcast.
I think also we should have our patrons, if you want, when you subscribe and you decide to join the Shortbox family, provide a phonetic spelling of your name so that way so that way if it's ethnic, you might be in the clear. You might be in the clear.
Weirder, the better, the more common.
The more it sounds like a Cree name, you should be fine.
Jake. And real quick, man, I want to go and shout out the future patrons. I know you out there. You guys are just waiting to enjoy all these bonus episodes.
Please give us your money.
Yeah, give us the money. Exclusive merch and gifts. And commercial-free episodes, too, because this will be one of our first commercial episodes. So our patrons, of course...
As Lars would say, freak what you feel. That's all I say. That's all I ask. That's all I ask.
Go to patreon.com/theshortbox to sign up and see what we've got for our reward tiers. Let me see what else I got. Want to go to shout out Dean Hughes. I think I might have mentioned I met him at the comic shop on Black Friday. He was a big fan of the show. Had nothing but nice things to say about everyone here in the podcast. He ended up sending an email that I kind of got lost, and it had to deal with like Black Friday sales. So I just want to go and shout out to Dean Hughes, and my apologies for missing that email. But thank you for sending that in. I want to go ahead and mention and shout out our new sponsor, man, Collective Con.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Collective Con.
It's cool to say that, huh?
It is, baby. North Florida's premier comic book and pop culture event is returning for another huge year of comics, music, entertainment, art, cosplay, and more. You'll find out more about the convention later on in the show. And in case you missed it, like I said, if this is your first time tuning in, and in case you missed our last episode, we had a deep or in-depth discussion about the latest Star Wars movie, Rise of the Skywalker. That episode can be found on your favorite podcast app now.
Look, guys, the only reason we do these sort of house cleaning things in the very beginning is because we feel that we put out a product and we put out the kind of stuff that we'd want to listen to, and we would be remiss if we didn't tell you ahead of time, like, hey, we claim to be a pop culture comic book podcast, but if we don't speak on these things, people always are like, hey, how come you guys didn't say any shit about Star Wars, huh? It's like, we did. Just listen to this episode. But it comes off coming like, oh, well, hey, you can listen to this at the blah-blah. Yeah. Like, I promise you, like, the only reason we're doing this is so that way we keep you guys in the know.
Yeah. Well said. And that's really the end of it, man. We try to knock it out in the beginning so we don't interrupt the flow of the rest of the show.
Truth.
Which we're about to jump in right now. So usually for Artist Spotlight episodes, we normally start off with kind of going down the timeline and hitting like the career milestones and kind of giving you like, we do the homework for you, is that what I like to say. You know, that way you can come into these type of episodes completely blind.
Either a virtual audio Wikipedia, if you will.
So, I mean, if you know who Will Eisner is, perfect. I think you'll learn some things from this episode. And if you don't, this is a perfect kind of crash course into the life and legendary history of Will Eisner. And you might end up leaving wanting to check out some of these titles. The way we're going to switch up this episode is we wanted to, because Will Eisner's been an impactful force for good to comic books as an art form and culture since his career started in 1936.
Brooklyn!
We decided to focus on arguably his two biggest claim to fame and contributions, Contract with God and The Spirit. And, of course, we'll touch on some of the other key milestones and contributions that he's provided throughout this episode as well. But since Cesar has wonderfully set the stage for us in that intro, let's go ahead and start out with Contract with God and work our way back to The Spirit. Kind of Tarantino, this artist spotlight. But I want to go ahead and start off by asking everyone, like we normally do, what was everyone's first conscious exposure to Will Eisner? Ed, if you want to lead us off on this one.
My first, I guess, exposure to him, and before I even really knew who he was just reading Wizard back in the day and seeing the Eisner Awards and just kind of going backwards from there. But I didn't know who he was. I never, at that time, I wasn't really actively looking for him. I was more interested in the current things at the time, but I just always saw his names and always saw these awards attached to him. So it's just kind of like, I think I was at Chamberlain's and I saw a little old copy of that little brown, paperback like, it would just brittle pages, yellowed out, and I got it. And then the first thing that I read, even before Spirit and stuff, was Contract with God.
I know exactly which copy did you find my hidden copy? Is that the one you found?
Well, this was like years ago.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch.
I might have found because I did stuff too.
Just kidding. Dude, everyone does. It's the best part about Chairman Book Night.
And that's why everything in there is disorganized like a mofo.
Everything I find was by random. So yeah, that's the first thing I.
Wow, so pretty late.
So yeah, pretty his later stuff, and this was when I was like still a kid. So it was like pretty. I'm reading superhero stuff, and then I'm reading Contract.
Oh Jesus, God!
It's like, oh man, and it was so, I guess, a little more jarring for me at that time, just because of the content and the themes and the nature of the stories with that kind of cartoony style.
It's so such a contrast.
Yeah, such a contrast. It's like, man, this is heavy stuff. But it was like a really old, brittle. I don't even know where it's at now. I just got the new awesome.
It's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Nobody knows.
But that's I started in on the deep end. It's like, oh, Will Eisner, that's that guy the awards are all about. I'll check this out. I just got it. I didn't even flip through it or anything. It's like, oh, this is cool. This looks interesting. Just like, oh, I like this art, and got it. And I was like, oh my god.
Ed's family's like trying to offer him dumplings. He's like, no, I'd like a bagel with some schmear.
What's the point?
Why do we even do this? I'm Jewish now.
No, yeah, it's like, what's the point?
It's all nihilistic.
So yeah, that was my first exposure to him. So I kind of worked backwards from just seeing his name everywhere, and then kind of, oh, okay, and then from there, just kind of like a lot of these, these artists that are not in our generation. I guess even though he worked until the end of his life, but he wasn't. I was more into like. The young guns, the McFarlanes, the Sam Keats.
Sure, I mean, yeah, of course.
The cool, big 90s extreme stuff.
Right. The bastard children of Will Eisner.
Yeah, so it's, that was my first full thing I got was Contract with God.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, start. See, what about you, man? First conscious exposure?
First conscious exposure was actually some of the Will Eisner instructional books that he put out, like those little textbooks, sequential art. And I was like 7. So I was looking at these things like, like
you can work in the food industry,
right? Yeah. So it was kind of like, this is kind of like interesting because it was,
man, there's nothing to do in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Did somebody say there's nothing to Duval in Jacksonville?
Danny Duval, what are you doing here?
Your ignorance summoned me. Now shut up and listen to these words. North Florida's premier anime, comic book, sci-fi, and pop culture event, Collective Con, returns for its 6th year. On March 20th through the 22nd, stars from The Mandalorian, Game of Thrones, Supernatural, The Crow, Dragon Ball Z, and even famous Pokemon card illustrator Mitsuhiro Arita is flying in from Japan to join in on the fun.
Wow! That sounds awesome!
Why are you still standing here? Go buy your tickets today at collectivecon.com, you lovable Nimrods!
it's his style. His style, everybody's like, it's, a lot of people would say it's cartoony. Definitely his style. Could he do like photorealistic? Sure. I mean, but he definitely wanted to do, I guess it was easier for him to do sort of like a more kinetic.
Yeah, and that has more
line
of an
work.
appeal.
Yeah.
A broader appeal.
His line work is freaking ridiculously kinetic. It's amazing. Like you see, they're almost moving. And even in that little textbook, like, because I was like, ooh, I want to know about comics, And it was like sequential art, and it was like way over my head, and I got completely overwhelmed.
This is like a college,
right?
Right.
And I mean,
textbook.
Yeah, and I mean, one of those books based on his lectures at
yes.
And he came up with the sequential art, the terminology.
Yeah,
right.
That's the one. I think that
Guys, you got to understand. My parents, they didn't understand that kids shouldn't be reading every book. Like most brown parents, they were like, "Yo,
it's a cartoon. You're
they
good."
Were like, reading is good. So we bought you the Stephen King book. You're 10. Enjoy. And I'm like,
boobies. F words. They say
suckers.
fuck.
But like, it was the same concept. Like they were like, "Oh, my weird little son likes to draw. Here you go, kid. Enjoy."
Thank you, Father.
And I'm just looking at this like, what the hell am I looking at? Not really, because I was 7. I was more like, what the pee-pee poo-poo am I looking at? But it was phenomenal. And then I guess after that, fast forward to, like Ed was saying, like an entire diet of 90s artists, and then going back in time and then going back in time to the point where I find Will Eisner, and I'm like, oh, this was the textbook guy. And it's funny because I couldn't have been more right. Like, he wrote the textbook for comics, like metaphorically and literally, you know, like dude knows what he's talking about. So I read A Contract with God also, and it depressed me on so many levels. But I mean, I don't like, but the same way like of Mice and Men does, you know, like you read it and it's like, somebody would be like, man, that book's depressing. And I feel like Will Eisner would be like, yo, that's Brooklyn, baby. Like, that's New York. What are you talking about? Like, that's just life. People...
But in context, though, it's not just depressing stories. It's a snapshot of Depression era in America.
Right,
so
Little vignettes.
It's a comic and it's a historical
He
document.
loved the 1930s.
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, that was
He grew
his
up in
jam.
the Depression.
Yeah,
So
that's... Dude grew up in a depression. He was kind of like sturdy, you know? Like, ended up joining the military.
Yo, like,
He got drafted.
Ended up getting,
He got drafted to fucking World War II.
Right.
Yeah.
He was born in what it says 1917, Brooklyn, New York.
He was a
Oh my
kid.
God, it's crazy.
I mean, did you guys read like how his mom was like, "Hey, look, I need your help. Like, you got to get a job too. Like, we
Imagine.
are broke.
Hey, you guys want to play stickball? Shut up, Jew. You know,
like,
that was his life.
like, I need you to get a job because your dad's over here being an artist.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
The dream.
And it kind of backfired because I think his dad was like, "No,
yeah.
you should be an artist too."
I know his dad was like, cassette designer and painted theater stuff, and that's what, one of his big influences for sure.
Ashley, what about you? You have a pretty interesting story as far as Will Eisner.
Well, so freshman year of college, I took this elective called Understanding the Graphic Narrative. And
Wow.
I honestly, I thought I was going to be reading comics, like straight. I was like, oh, we're going to like talk about X-Men.
It's fancy.
I was like, I'm going to get an A.
I've
I
been
know all
fooled a
about
couple times.
X-Men.
Reading
That's like when
comics.
Hispanics try and take Spanish, and they're like, ah, shit.
Conjugate.
Yeah, so I went in, and the very first class, he talked about Will Eisner, and he's like, your homework is to read Contract with God, and we're going to discuss it next
my
class.
gosh.
Next
And,
class.
Yeah.
Damn, I need time to like
Right.
stop crying.
That's what it like every
It's not
class
an easy
he
read.
would assign us a book, and we had this amazing library full of like trade paperbacks and like graphic novels. Like the library was so good.
That's cool.
But I read that and I was like, oh my god, what am I in for?
Yeah.
This is gonna be a long class. But it was fantastic. And then he ended up coming to the college the year after.
Oh, wow.
And it was just really cool to like know who he was, and he did like
cool.
a couple lectures and
Sweet.
talked about how poor he was, and everybody was like, oh god, that's terrible.
That's crazy. But like when
Man.
you're in it, though, you don't really feel it, right? I would imagine, like, because I've been to like people, I've been to other countries where like, quote unquote, third world countries where people are like, oh, look at them. I feel so bad for them. Look, they don't have all of this. And it's like, they don't know any
know it.
other life
Yeah,
but
this is-
that.
yeah.
So it's like, nah, fool, we good. Like, I'm cool. Like, I wonder if it was like that in the Depression because the only way to survive was just to know. Like,
Yeah, that, and he was like a kid, too, so your perspective
he
is
came
different.
Up in
Yeah.
He wasn't an adult.
Right.
you
It
know.
wasn't until I kind of had that realization.
like, this is
as
the
an-
way it is.
Yeah, as an
Yeah.
adult.
Yeah.
Like when I was like, yo, mom, like, were we poor? And my mom was like, oh, yes. Your father was an E4. And
I didn't.
Oh, my!
It's gone
We
on
lived
the-
in a
yeah.
trailer on
Yeah.
somebody's land.
Right.
I've had a lot of those like,
But I didn't know
that's
it.
right.
Yeah, I didn't know
know
it.
it.
I was like, this is Indiana, so I was like, I got to make snowmen and stuff. This is awesome.
You had that
we
Joe
lived in-
Jackson.
we lived in a trailer, a single wide.
So wait, so Ash, I mean, how was it like getting to be lectured by Will Eisner? I mean, how was he in person?
So it was amazing because we had a whole, amazing like we had all kinds of technology, and he could have drawn on like one of the Wacom tablets and had it
Right.
show up on the thing. But he asked for those little acetate
transparencies?
things. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's drawing characters on transparencies instead of
man.
using like all this stuff that we had. And
this
it was
newfangled.
it was amazing, and there weren't even that many. It was a small college, but there weren't even that many people there. And everywhere he went, like everywhere he walked around, there were maybe like 10 of us.
That's so cool.
Just like in a little group, just following him like ducklings.
pods.
Just,
like
say
fucking
something.
apostles,
Yeah.
Like,
Well said.
he's sitting there like, back in the Depression era, what we did was we would take the bat that we used for stickball, and then we would would hit a homeless man in his mouth and use the blood to draw because that was all we had
Oh, my
was
God.
homeless bum mouth blood.
Did he do a lot of "you kids have it so easy" speeches?
Well, when I said that he was talking about being poor, he didn't actually say he was poor, but he was talking about how he wishes he had enough money to live in Sarasota and take classes at Ringling. So everybody following him was like, "Oh, you're not rich? Like you're Will Eisner. How are you not rich?"
No, Ringling's just expensive.
So,
It's just not. You're not poor, bro.
Yeah.
It's just really fucking
Yeah.
expensive. But because he lived in Florida too, right?
He retired.
Yeah.
in Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jewish.
Yeah, dude, it's kind of the deal.
but he was just such a sweet old, and he did like portfolio reviews, and he like
that's cool.
sat down with everybody and
That's
like took
awesome.
time. And I could, because he looked at I was a freshman. I was right out of high school, and it was terrible. And he was like, "Oh, you have such nice colors," which is like a nice way of being like,
But I mean, he
everything
ain't
else.
wrong.
"You
Everything
still
else.
can't draw, but your colors are nice." And I'll never forget that. So my colors were nice. I was like, "Thanks."
Colors are still nice, actually. Like, you'd be proud. You'd be proud. Damn it! I can't follow up that. My introduction to Will Eisner is not for the best of reasons. I guess I was introduced
We
to
were
Will
doing
Eisner.
a show about Will Eisner.
No. You remember that story about Sucker Punch and how I really liked that movie? Well,
You mean liked past tense? You love that movie. Present
DVD's right
tense,
here.
Nah.
Present
Special edition.
so I guess my first, I'll say my first unconscious exposure to Will Eisner was the movie in 2008. Like I remember going to the theaters and watching. That was like when I started going to movies to watch theaters to watch movies. And I went to go see that because it was
Which one?
the one in 2000, the Frank Miller
The
directed.
Spirit.
Yeah, The Spirit. Yeah, I'm sorry, The Spirit was my first I didn't know that it was like tied to Will Eisner or any of the historical background.
Yeah.
I just went to go watch that movie because Eva Mendes, Scarlett Johansson.
You sick-
I know. I'm a sick fucking pervert.
You're sitting there like Pee Wee Herman in the fucking Sarasota theater, just like sans serif. Yeah. Oh,
Which I mean, I didn't know that Gabriel what's his last name?
Gabriel Macht.
Macht was the lead at the time. But
Yeah.
looking back, I'm like, oh, the dude from Suits.
Right.
But at the time, I didn't know like it was. I knew it was based on a comic book. I just didn't know the legacy of
Sure.
Will Eisner and
Sure,
what it stood
sure.
for. I just went to go see the movie because it looked cool and it was Frank Miller. I don't remember if I liked the movie or not. I just remember thinking like how cool it looked.
dude.
I was like, man.
Even if the movie wasn't all that great, like that movie is so exclusive, it's not even funny.
Oh,
that movie, like you have to be a Spirit fan in order to like it. Otherwise,
That's why I was
you're not
saying
gonna like
I
it.
want to rewatch it.
Yeah,
knowing
now-
what I know now,
Right,
Because I
right.
think I might really appreciate it. But then it just looked cool. It was sexy. It was cool. It was Frank Miller. I was all for it. And I'll be honest, it wasn't until this episode that I read Contract with God. I ended up buying like the big the trilogy one that's
Yeah, I
got
got that
you know
too. Yeah.
Life Force and the Dropsie Avenue. I almost, and I'll be straight up with you guys, I almost did not get around to Spirit because I wanted to finish the rest of that book.
Right.
Contract with God and A Life Force blew my mind like this month. But I did end up getting around to Spirit and had a really fucking good time with that too. So I guess that kind of gets out of the way of that. I wanted to ask, what did you guys do as far as like research? Did you guys use any particular material? Did you guys revisit any comic books? And did you find anything new or interesting that you didn't know prior?
I think we were talking about this before. Like I said, I've watched a lot of interviews because when we do these things, I like to actually hear the words from the artist.
Sure.
And
It's a good call.
but other things I just stumbled on was that we were talking about it. That pencil test, for the Spirit cartoon.
Oh,
that was
the Brad Bird pencil test.
Yeah, Brad Bird, and then looked really great. I wish they made it.
Jesus, man.
And then we were.
I mean, they kind of did, right, with the Incredibles.
yeah,
There's a lot of Spirit nods in there. I mean, it's not the same thing, but
I'm
yeah.
the Spirit. Yeah, and then the Sam Jones, the TV pilot they did that it was like a made for TV, really low budget, campy looking Spirit. You know, that was pretty. It's almost like
Like, why would they cast a huge ass like linebacker football player type guy
Yeah.
to play like Denny Colt? You know?
yeah. I just think that's the way casting was at the time.
Sure,
you know,
sure,
you just want like
sure.
a big kind of a more physical looking type of
Right.
aloof big jock guy.
Tim Burton hadn't rocked the
No,
boat
yeah.
with Batman by getting Mr. Mom to play
Yeah,
Batman.
exactly. So he was playing to type of, or that for that version of it.
Don't worry, I'll save you.
But yeah, just a bunch of these older interviews. There was like a really interesting interview with him and Stan Lee.
Yeah, that's so good.
With
he's so
Stan Lee,
humble. I like listening to talk just where he's like, "Oh, you're very nice, Stanley. Thank you for that one."
What was the name of Stanley's show?
It was like Comic Book Greats.
Yeah, Comic Book Greats. Yeah. There's like a whole. I found a YouTube channel that's got like all of them, and I ended up watching a little bit of that one too.
Dude, it's funny. You sent me that interview, Botter.
Yeah.
And I'll get to it once Ed's done. Go ahead, Ed. Sorry.
Oh no, it's basically just that, and I reread The Contract with God because I bought that new edition because I have no idea where the old one was. But yeah, but a lot of times when we do these, I like try to find some old interviews, especially from like 80 something older. So just kind of it keeps in everything. So it feels more authentic to me. They're not as guarded as what they say, in the climate we're living in. So it's
right.
I like just watching some of those older interviews and things.
Good point. Thanks, Ed. See, what about you? What you end up researching with?
So I the research I did was sort of weird because I was out of the country while I did it. I just took and thankfully it came in the mail. Will Eisner's Life in Pictures, which is basically the biography with names changed of all like his rise and fall as far as comics are concerned, and it's amazing because like he knew Bob Kane, like he went to high school with Bob Kane, and he shows up in the comic as a character named Ken Korn, and
well, Bob Kane he said got him to draw for that, Wow,
yeah,
magazine.
he got him, he hooked him up with some jobs, and it's cool to see because you see like all that they have like a little index at the end of the book with all of like the artists and who they're supposed to be.
Oh, that's
so it's
awesome.
like Ken Korn's supposed to be Bob Kane. Of course, Jack King is Jack Kirby. And dude, that's crazy that Jack Kirby worked for Will Eisner back in the day. And even then, he was like, there's like a little scene painted out where this is what hooked me to the book and what made me want to do more research was where you see like he's name dropping these artists that he worked with, not in a sort of like I work with them, because when he worked with them, they were just
kids.
They were nobodies that were just like, look, comics is the intro. I want to get into illustrating magazines, fashion, all that stuff. That's where the money is, right?
Yeah.
So they're sitting here and he's like Jack was this temperamental like Jewish kid from like a gang like back in the day and like wouldn't take shit from anybody, which always cracked me up. So it's like this like Italian dude comes in and he's like,
Hey, how you doing? I noticed you're using the towels from some other company. You only use these towels, okay? Only these towels you use.
And Will Eisner's kind of like, I mean, but they're just towels. I don't understand what the problem is. Like, hey, you're gonna use these fucking towels, And then like Jack Kirby comes down the other and he's like,
What did you say?
You get the fuck out of here, kid. He's like about to beat up this dude, but Jack Kirby's a little guy,
Yeah.
So he's like, you get out of here. You can't let these Italian guys boss you around. This is very, very New York, where it's like nobody refers to anybody by their name, just by their race, which cracks me up. But I was in Spain, and I only had A Life in Pictures, and I had The Spirit, like 2 volumes of The Spirit, random volumes. I had read a contract with God already, and usually whatever like crazy last minute interviews Botter sends me, he's like, yo dude, have you seen this? This is freaking freak. What? And he sends me and I'm like, oh shit, I gotta watch this. Oh god damn it, up. And I'm watching it and my wife is like, this is kind of neat. And I said, have you read A Contract with God? And she's like, no. I said, just read this first story. Let me know what you think. So she read it and she's like, whoa. Like, I don't know. It was like Ed's reaction where it was like, I don't know how to feel about it because the artwork is so sort of stylized in a lighthearted fashion, but it's telling a real-ass story that it's messing with my head. I'm like, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
You're doing it
That's
right.
pretty well
That's
said.
exactly how it's supposed to be. You got the right feeling. And then she's like, but you were reading that other guy with the blue suit and the domino mask. And I'm like, oh.
That was his early stuff.
I was like, this shit. I'm telling you right now, this shit is hilarious, and I don't know if you're ready for it. It's crazy. But, yeah, just basically A Life in Pictures was my kind of my unfamiliar territory.
I want to add to something, Ed. You just made that joke. That was his early stuff. But everything I was able to glean from Will Eisner is that dates are really important for him. Like the way like comic book professionals and critics and like even like fellow writers and artists like look at his work is like his spirit stuff and then Contract with God, everything else afterwards.
Yeah.
Which I thought was pretty fascinating because I ended up buying this the Best of Spirit Will Eisner book, right? And they got a bunch of selected stories, but for every story they tell you what year it was published. And I thought it was a little weird at first, but it wasn't until I started doing some more research. I was on his website, WillEisner.com. I was reading all through his Wikipedia, and what I was able to kind of get out of it was because in his studio, he had a bunch of different artists and writers helping him on the Spirit prior to him being drafted into World War II. And then when he came back from World War II, they say like that's when he took full creative control of the Spirit, and those are like really what solidified like his reputation with the Spirit as well as like comic books.
Yeah, and those series he was doing like 7 or 8 page like comics every week for a newspaper.
Yeah,
and I mean he's smart because he's always, even though the Spirit is pretty much accessible, almost all ages type of title, he wanted a more adult audience. So instead of publishing it traditionally like a comic book in a newsstand where it's where kids will buy it, he put it in newspapers that come every week. So people who are going to look at it, it's like adults are going to catch on. I might catch this and have more circulation with a newspaper than I would in the newsstand.
I also to Cesar's story, I read a little story that Will Eisner was saying, because it's kind of cool to think about like how like comic books. What did he say? He was like, comic books are the ghetto. Because, like, so many, like, to your point, like, so many artists at that time were just trying to... Well, it was just a means to get a dollar.
I think we'll get into some of that. Yeah. And also how pulps versus comic books was a big deal, too.
But he told a story about, like, this mob-looking kind of dude came in and was going to give him, like, $3 a book to draw, like, the Tijuana Bibles.
Yeah. That's in the Life in Pictures.
Okay, word. And he
he's like, you can draw smut, like you can draw Popeye fucking olive oil.
Yeah,
and you got a real pencil. Anyway, Ashley didn't talk about her research experience.
What about you?
Oh, so
you're like, I hung out with the dude. Like,
yeah.
I was gonna say, out of all of us, she's the only one that's.
God damn it. Yo, this is Botter. Sorry for interrupting this episode, but I'll keep it brief. I wanted to let you know about a massive sale we have going on over at the Shortbox store on all of our merchandise and apparel. That's theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com. You can now save 20% off your entire order using the discount code YOO, Y-O-O. So if you've been waiting for the right time to finally buy that gauntlet snapback, or if you ever wanted to buy any of the shirts you see me wear on the podcast, well, now's your chance to get them for a steal. We still have a few sizes left of everything, but they won't last long, and once they're gone, they are gone. And then I mentioned that all of our apparel is screen printed on high quality material. None of that heat transfer or direct to garment stuff. Our shirts are some of the most comfortable ones you'll ever wear, and the hats look even better in person. So wear your support for the Shortbox Nation proudly, knowing that you're going to look damn good doing it. Get to theshortboxstore.bigcartel.com as soon as you can, and don't forget to use that discount code YOO, Y-O-O, to save 20% off your entire order. All of this information can be found in this episode's show notes if you want to get there faster. Thanks for not pressing fast forward. Now back to the show. Our joke about Ashley is so true every episode.
I just realized it. She talked to God. That's crazy.
Wow.
Holy shit.
She's like, me, Morgan Freeman, Will Eisner. What was that, Tijuana Flats one day? She was wild.
We both had the chalupas. And imagine my surprise when I realized he didn't like queso.
People are always like, Botter, man, you guys always joke on Ashley. He's like, no, every joke is the truth.
She literally knows everyone.
She collects souls and pogs, and she's got famous celebrity friends.
Damn.
No, but Ashley, what did you use for research this go around?
So I felt like I was, pretty familiar with him, but I just did, the regular internet research, and I did. So the Spirit, I guess I've never really given it a chance because, Contract with God and Life Force and Dropsie Avenue were kind of like, it was like my jam. You know what I mean?
They were also mic drops too.
Exactly.
Like you're like, boom, all right, I guess I'm done. Like, follow this act.
So like fundamental. But I had no idea that he had actually lost a daughter.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like a big like moment. You know what I mean? Because all this time I thought he just started writing this stuff.
He kept that kind of, didn't really
yeah.
tell that till later on. But she was, I think, 16 or 17.
Yeah, it's a teenage daughter.
It's like leukemia, I think.
Yeah, and it just makes rereading that book completely different.
Oh yeah.
after knowing that.
Yeah, I want to say it wasn't until like the re-release of Contract with God, which has been re-released plenty of times, but I think it was like one specific one in 2005 or 2006 where he, which might be the one I've got. He did an epilogue. Right, an epilogue, yeah. No,
yeah,
probably.
with the little kid.
Yeah, where he actually wrote about like the story was inspired by the the death of my daughter,
Right.
And that was like the first time outside of like close family and friends that it was made public for the public to know.
That's that old school, like
right?
tough guy sort of mentality, and not in derogatory sense where it's like buy a Ford truck, you're a tough guy.
Yeah.
Like I mean, like look, like life sucks sometimes.
Yeah, and
suck it up, but it doesn't mean all of life sucks, and
you don't want to burden others with that,
right? And I remember like the good times, and this is how I deal with it. Like crazy, man, crazy.
So I mentioned earlier that we were going to start with Contract with God. I think this is a good jumping on point to kind of talk about what is Contract with God. It's the creation of like the history around it, and then we can kind of talk about our personal feelings about it. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can feel free to chime in. But I think the best way to explain what a contract with God and other tenement stories, as sometimes it's called, it's essentially he's telling the history of New York's immigrant communities, specifically the Jewish American community and that experience during the 1930s, during the Depression.
Sure.
And Contract with God comprises of 4 standalone stories. You've got the title story, A Contract with God. You've got the Street Singer. You've also got the Super, and then Cookaline. Is that what I said?
Yeah, I think so.
Cookaline.
Cookaline. So, yeah. It was released in 1978, I believe, by Baronet Books. And this came shortly after. So, I mean, it's 1970s. Will Eisner is working. He had just finished. He wrapped up The Spirit in 1952. He ends up just working at his own company. I think it was called the American Visual Productions or something. I think it was like AVP.
It's all educational.
Yeah, educational.
Stuff.
So he was drawing like educational, instructional material for like the government, businesses, et cetera, et cetera. 1970s comes around. The popularity of underground comics definitely influenced him to maybe get back into this and to tell this story. Because if I remember correctly, he wanted to write this story a long time ago, but there was no publisher willing to pick up the story.
Dude, isn't that crazy how that comes back around, right? Like,
right?
Like he's just kind of sitting there like fucking Mount Vesuvius, sort of dormant, like this powerhouse, like just sitting there waiting for something to get him, like that catalyst to get him to erupt and tell these like crazy heartfelt stories. And like this whole DIY movement kind of starts springing up, and he's like, yeah, time to stretch out the old bones,
So, and I mean, to say his point, he's always wanted to tell longer storytelling. He's been, he was inspired by wordless novels by Lynn Ward, works by Flemish author Franz Mazaril, German author Ora Knuckle. But that's one thing about Will Eisner that you could trace even back to when he first started, his career in 1936. He always just had a bigger dream and ambition for comic books. Like he could see what this medium was capable of, I think, well before
the
anyone
potential.
else.
He had a bigger vision than most.
Yeah. So, I mean, 1970 kind of comes around, underground comic books. The fame there starts getting him motivated. I think he also ended up leaving his company, American Visual Corporation. That was the name of it. But also, that's around the same time that his daughter also passed away, too. So it was like almost like the perfect accumulation of like just different factors coming into play. So he approaches... he actually approached a different publishing company first, and I forget the name of it right now. But they were like, oh yeah, this sounds good, but it wasn't until they saw the almost finished product, and they were like, well, that's not really a comic book. That's what we specialize in, but this company will probably take you up on your offer, and that's how he went about meeting like Baronet Books. And he actually fronted them money because they didn't have enough money as is. And I mean, I think that just goes to show you just how important this was for him. Like it wasn't going to be about the money.
I think it was kind of therapy too, man. Like this dude was born to do what he did, like it's like he's all the things you mentioned seem like kind of like a perfect storm of like catalysts where it was like, the passing of his daughter, this movement for underground comics, he's definitely still got his finger on the pulse, he still knows what's going on in the business. He's ran at least 2 at this point, businesses, right?
Yeah.
3, like random, right?
Well, Eisner was a boss, man.
Yeah, like literally.
Well,
And-
that thing where you saying him funding it doesn't surprise me because he funded the Eisner and Iger,
Right.
and he was
yeah,
19.
Right.
It's
Just
like
a
I know
young
a
guy.
place we can rent these rooms for $5 a month.
This from the same guy who, as a kid, was like, I can draw in 5 different styles. I'll draw in 5 different styles.
Use surnames.
Produce
So
5
we-
different comics. Use 5 different.
so we
names.
look like a big deal.
right.
Yeah.
Like that is a work ethic. So the work was never the problem. It was just like, how do I get out of the house? What's going to get me out? And I think the only way he could, I think it was therapy. And he was born to do what he did.
Yeah, I remember an interview saying he said he was a square peg that fit a square hole for as far as comics goes.
Yeah.
Because he said he wanted to be a painter and a writer.
Yeah.
Like his dad, but then he found this kind of nice medium with comics. So yeah, it's like I saw the opportunity, and it is almost like I don't. He's really, even in those older interviews, he's very, like you said, humble. He's like, anyone could have done this, It was like, no, anyone could not have done this.
No, dude. Do you think that he's the reason why a lot of people try to recruit comic book artists at such a young age? Do you think he set that standard? Where it was like,
there's no other real example. I mean, before him,
right?
It's
Like where it's like you're like, dude, we might find the next Eisner. Who knows? Like, let's
well,
look
now
and
you're
see,
seeing
like,
them recruiting people from like South America and from
Right.
Globally.
right.
Yeah, it's
But I don't know if the intention is to find another, even
No.
not
But
just,
like just the idea
Yeah.
of like, somebody at age 18/19 shouldn't be discounted because of their age. Like
No.
they could be a badass pencilist.
Yeah.
and
or-
his partner was in his 30s or
Right.
40s, so
So
yeah.
I can give that, but I think with Will Eisner, it wasn't like to get the next even similar type of Will Eisner vibe. You would have to like really believe in your artist's like ability to tell a story and like give them like the reins.
Right, and during the Depression age, like 19 was 80 years old.
Yeah. At least you looked 80 years old, right?
Right.
He lived till 30. And he
Right,
just-
there's like kids, and there were kids that were 4 years old doing shifts like overnight at the docks. Like, yeah, I got another shift. My boss is fucking me.
But even that, like him and Iger, because
I'm
Iger,
four.
Iger was like the sales guy and he was the production guy.
Sure.
And so, you have like Wally Wood, Jack Cole, you have all
Right.
these like Hall of Famers as kids working there, and then he leaves it to do
Yeah.
the Spirit.
Because he doesn't know.
Iger
right?
buys them out.
He doesn't have a time machine.
Well,
you know?
because I want to do this. Because basically he kind of became, instead of producing stuff, he became like in further down his career more of like a teacher mentor.
Yeah.
Like he
Right.
basically had like, I saw this room, like a drawing with like all the artists were in one room behind drawing desks.
Right.
And he's walking around. It's like, oh, you need to fix this,
cool.
and
Can you
basically
imagine?
finding, okay, you're the best inker. So he's starting this assembly line process, which is which is basically the comic book how it works now. You like the penciler hands it to the inker, hands it to the colorist.
Right.
So basically, he had that set up and found the best people to utilize. So he's basically becoming a foreman, and he wants to be a creator. And he leaves a successful company, gets bought out, and then does the Spirit, and
Right.
another success.
Right.
I want to go into that a little more detail on our Spirit part, because I think that's really fascinating, like how the Bob and Iger Studios, as well as like him jumping off to do Spirit, went about. But as far as Contract with God, he spent like 2 years just trying different art styles. I think even like different colors. I think before he landed on just doing it in sepia.
Yeah.
Let's see. I know that he had a couple of different names he wanted to call it. He was considering calling it like Tales from the Bronx. I think A Tenement in the Bronx was also like another name. It was like the publishing company that was like, no, I think this lead story, A Contract with God, is is the one to go with.
It's a good title.
Yeah,
It
right.
hits you.
Let me see what else you got here. Oh, Eisner was also very familiar with like book making skills. That's why that book. That's why
Right.
that was a big part in why he wanted to advertise it as a graphic novel. Was because like he knew how to make a decent book, like how to do printmaking and all of that.
He knew
stuff.
how to do maintenance on printers, print presses as well, which also helped him get a job. That's another thing, man. Like he literally, not even literally, he figuratively was the guy to know how the inner workings of print. Help me out.
printmaking.
Just like the technology.
Yeah, like it's like he had a connection with it, right? Like if he didn't have a connection with it already artistically through, medium, art, he also had a connection literally like he's like, yeah, I work doing maintenance on like printing presses.
Yeah,
so
it's like to use like a music example, it's like Les Paul,
Right.
Like, who's a killer guitar player, but he's also inventing effects. He's
Right,
inventing
right.
things, or even a more contemporary, even though it's like 30 years, but like a Van Halen.
Sure.
So those type of guys who are excellent craftsmen and players, however you want to put it, but then they also know they can also do the technical side and the mechanical stuff. Yeah.
Very rare to have like both of those gifts and not be like a nutcase.
Yeah.
Because it's you guys know
Yeah.
like most like brilliant people that act like Howard Hughes is the best example of that. Dude was an artist and a mechanic and an engineer and also a fucking crazy person. No disrespect to his legacy, but Will Eisner was none of those things
He's very
regarding
grounded.
the craziness.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he was like very, very, very stable sort of person. Could look at something, tell you how it worked mechanically, and also
like
draw you
meticulous.
like a beautiful picture. You know, like,
So, I mean,
and that's kind of what Contract of God is.
and if Contract with God was his, if the mission was to express tell more mature literary, stories in a comic book format, or even, what would end up becoming a graphic novel, the whole package, and I kind of beat myself to the punch, but he was thinking about the whole package, not just like the art style or the content and the story, but also like just from like that business acumen of his, like, I want this to be sold in bookstores, not just comic book
Yeah.
shops, specifically bookstores. So we need to advertise it as such.
Yeah,
I
I bought my copy of Contract with God at Books A Million.
and that's why I think on the original pressing or publish, it says a Contract with God, a graphic novel. Like it was thought out. He wanted it to be called a graphic novel to give it that prestige, to be sold at bookstores. And I think what a lot of people end up confusing or debating is did he coin the term graphic novel?
No.
And that's not the case.
That's something Botter and I were talking about ahead of time. Like I was very adamant where I was like, yo, like I think like Will Eisner came up with the term graphic novel and blah, blah, blah. And Botter was like,
I know it was
this is
like
a testament to his research ability.
Yeah,
Is
I
that-
know it was like I think it was like an art critic or who coined the term.
Yeah.
Right.
But this is recognized as, and it wasn't technically your first, graphic novel.
Sure.
But it's the first.
It's the one by
recognized,
which all others are
accepted.
measured against. That's
Boom.
for sure.
Yeah,
That's it.
And because like this stuff you would consider that was the counterculture stuff, which was not
Right.
accessible to
Right.
the masses like this became.
Yeah.
Look, folks, Botter may fucking mispronounce your name, but he will do his fucking homework 100%. He will do it.
But yeah, sequential art is his term.
That's the one.
A term he's coined.
And I think that's what people mix up is probably
Yeah.
that. Is
And
he coined sequential.
Now, did he create Scott McCloud from his jizz? I thought he did. Did he
Yo,
do that?
right.
No, I don't know if he did that or not. If that's a real thing. But anyway, look, Contract with God is an exercise in social realism.
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do you tell these stories? That's another thing that's cool is that in the world of like comedy, usually the comedians that do the best are the ones that tell stories that no one else can copy because it's from their life.
Yeah.
Right? So like anyone could write a joke and then some other fucking asshole could steal it. Easy.
Yeah.
But if it's so personal that
Yeah.
no one else knows how to deliver it like you do, that was Will Eisner. Like Will Eisner with Contract with God was like, look, I'm a Jew. I grew up in Depression era. I saw other Jews. I know what it's like in the fucking Borscht Belt. I know what it's like in the Catskills. I know exactly what it's like. I lived this life little truer than I'm sad to say it happened.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of realism that he infused into the panels of every piece of artwork and Contract
There's
with
that
God.
authenticity because he's lived it.
Yeah, every panel is like a signature that says Eisner.
And he said in interviews
Eisner.
where it's either stuff that he's witnessed or has been told growing
Right.
up.
Yo,
So these are
like,
all
Right, or he
It's
did, or
life,
he lived.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shit. He said. I read somewhere that he said that the title story, "A Contract with God," was like his exercise in anguish. Like that event, like had him questioning his. I think it had him questioning his faith, and he worked it out through like this story. Like
Dude, Scorsese did that shit with Last Temptation, man. Like that's crazy to think about. I didn't know that.
his daughter's name was Alice. And in the original, like, kind of beginning sketches, he was going to use her name in the story,
Oh my
but
God.
he ends up switching it out for, I think, Rachel.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Yeah.
Raquel.
So, I mean, you don't get much more personal than that. I mean, shit, the first 2 pages of Contract with God, I read it, just 2 weeks ago, so it's still fresh in my mind. But those first 2 pages with like the rain and just like
him screaming at the and the thunder and the
what's the name of the main character? Frim Hirsch. Like, yeah, screaming. Like, come on, man. Like, just
dude, that's
just powerful.
It's primal, man. Like that shit is like old school humanity.
Yeah, and there's that thing with his dad working in the theater where his characters have that theatrical those poses and expressions.
Yeah, well, he also tends to paint them on a stage alone, almost like he lights them like boop, like a spotlight. Like if someone was like if an actor was delivering a soliloquy.
And that's the thing of he said that because his influences aren't so much superheroes, but like film and theater. So he got a lot of those lighting ideas from theater, and you figure or a film and theater where it's like the spotlights and those extreme lightings, and then even from his he's saying in the city, your light is pretty much directly above you because the buildings block, it's not coming from a side, so you're pretty much it's like a direct lighting.
Let me ask you guys a question. So do you find it any easier or harder to relate to his work, like not being able, like no one here has lost a daughter, right? No one here, save for me, is I assume is Jewish, in the sense, like do you still find it just as easily to, like, when you pick up Will Eisner's work, to be like, I'm there, I know what this guy's talking about?
With this series, there's, and it's not a big deal. It's not something but there is a lot of like the Yiddish language and stuff that's used. That's kind of It's kind of like it's not off-putting, but it's kind of like, okay, what's a lot of it you
like,
can
what's
understand.
What's a cook alone? Like, unless you know that it means cook alone, and it's
but
like,
you have to look at it. This is from this person's life, so it's
also dated.
Yeah, and you have to put the work in too. This is a type of thing where it's not like a passive entertainment where it's just.
That's what I was wondering.
Ed nailed it, and I want to hear from Ashley of this, but Ed, you nailed it, because I made a note that this was one of the first books in a long time that I kept like my phone on thesource.com or dictionary.com, because there's so many like Yiddish words and phrases and colloquialisms and even like and I'll be straight up, like I had to remind myself about some of the amendments. I was like, wait, what's this amendment? What's this great, like, because of how like close he ties it into like his Jewish, like,
well, even the Italian stuff, like, unless you know what Casa Nostra is, like, unless you know, like, that's the shit, like, hey, that's our shit, like, Italian.
So I mean, I
love it.
Like you to your point, you have to put your work into, like, really, I think, enjoy it, because it is dated, but in a good way. Like it encapsulates like this time period so well.
Yeah, and it's a historic. I mean, I treat it as like historical document.
That's what
I was wondering how accessible it was. Ashley, what do you think?
I mean, it is very dated, and I didn't really, if I wasn't sure what something meant, I didn't look it up. I just kept moving.
Just text me, I'll tell you.
But there's something about like seeing relating to a person that's in anguish.
Yeah.
And even though you've never, felt that because of that specific reason, like when you're reading that book and you see that panel, like you feel it.
That's the thing.
The overall themes, I think, are pretty accessible. It's just those details that kind of will throw you off if you're not familiar with the culture.
Right.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about, because I mean, we've got 3 respective artists here at the table. I wanted to talk about the art style of the book. Is there anything that you guys would highlight or want to mention or talk about?
You mentioned a little bit with the sepia tone, and just like it's like a memory. You're like, it's like almost like a dreamy type of atmosphere, and the way he uses, like, he doesn't draw like detailed backgrounds, but it's just like these lines and hatching,
right?
And it's just very like a theater, like a stage type of thing, and it's just really beautifully done. And it's not. And I was watching an interview where he's just walking along the waterfront in New York, and he's saying, I don't use any references for all my cityscapes, which is incredible.
Yeah.
So it's all from a memory or from like, so like I said, because
there's
New York,
no TV back then. So what else did he have to do but look at buildings?
So there's just the fact that no references, and it's he's talking about how New York itself is like not just the backdrop, but the it's like a character in itself. It's like a living, breathing, organic thing.
It gives you a hug whether you want it or not.
Dropsie Avenue has so much, like, it's a fictional place, but in my mind, that is like the New York I heard about as a kid. Like
Yeah.
the New York, or well, Pops was from Jersey, but the way he would describe like living in the projects, like
How dare you,
this
sir.
to me.
How dare you, sir?
Dropsy Avenue was like one of my favorite characters. It had so much fucking like grit and like weird charm to it, man. I wanted to highlight the splash, what I'm
come on.
rudely calling splash pages, but those
That's
one
not
page.
rudely. He fucking invented that
Yeah.
shit.
I mean, like no conventional borders, like
Yeah.
built-in, like no caption boxes. They were just
Yeah.
like floating word. Like it added to like that sense of poeticness.
So let me say this. And this is not a slight on Kirby's work, but isn't it kind of neat to see like Jack Kirby would do some pretty badass splash pages,
Yeah.
but not as good as his like the guy he worked for. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it. I'm putting the fucking dick on the table right now. Like Jack Kirby
candy.
was amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely. Splash pages though, like I feel like Will Eisner's kind of like, I'm still the Jedi Master, son.
I guess for me, it's like two different. Like Kirby was comic book splash pages, and Will Eisner to me was able to say,
but
"Well, I
Eisner-
don't need all this glitz and glamour." Like
They could have done the same thing, is what I'm saying. They could have done the same thing because the splash page only serves one purpose, and that's give you the title, give who worked on it, and in the very beginning, give you sort of like a bring the reader in. Come,
Yeah.
yes, please come this way. Like, I think they had definitely different styles, and this is not like like one guy's better than the
yeah,
other.
yeah.
I'm just saying like as far as like you could tell like Eisner was kind of like Ed said, true to his like form, was like, all right. By the way, I've decided to talk in a very sort of falsetto Brooklyn accent because maybe that'll help my art ability. That is that. So I decided to sort of talk like this, the way Pacino did in the first Godfather, and maybe my art style will increase. My wife will probably leave me, and no. Well, let me answer your first question, Botter. As far as like when you look at art style, like what did I think, and then I'll throw it to Ashley, who's actually touched Will Eisner in the eye.
she was like, I was actually in that picture with the editor.
She touched it. Like she touched the hem of his garment,
to
like
get some of his power.
right, like give me your powers, old
But here's
man.
the thing: I can't prove that it didn't help her because look at Ashley now.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I'm just
Dude,
saying.
there's a fucking Ashley art in my house right now. I can't say shit.
Yeah, well said.
Dude, so I would say, man, from an artist's perspective, I think just the like, kind of like what Ed was saying, where when you look at it, he knows how to. He basically created depth of field without the use of a camera, right? So, like when you take pictures in photography, you'll have different lenses you can use. And these lenses basically are mechanical versions of the human eye, right? So like if I'm focusing on Botter, maybe something in the background would seem blurry because my focus is on Botter. That is something that can be replicated with a 24-70 lens or 7200 lens with a camera. This is something that Will Eisner could replicate on a piece of paper just with line work. Like he could say, no, the focus is this person. There's a bunch of stuff in the background, but I'll draw it in a way to where your eye will recognize it as blurry.
Yeah.
And it creates depth of field, and it makes the image pop. It makes it three-dimensional. And that is crazy that both of his little old Jewish eyes were fucking working better than a Nikon fucking 850 right now. You know, like it's ridiculous. Or a red camera. Like this. By the way, I still haven't decided to give up on talking like this. I don't know if you guys know this. I'm Cesar from Brooklyn now. That's where I live.
Yeah, another thing too with this character, especially with the Contract with God series, because these are just regular folks, you know.
Yeah.
And then, but it's that thing with character design, and we've all probably heard it, where you'd make a silhouette of them, and you can tell who it is.
Yeah.
So they don't look the same. So everyone has such a unique look. Even just the amount of characters that interact. It's just just drawing regular folks, and he's never really drawn. He's never been like a superheroic, drawing like dynamic, like a Kirby, type of artist. But just the characters and just, like we were going back before, just the posing and the facial expression. It's so like you're in a theater and the guy in the back row has to see, your actions and stuff. So your exaggerated movement. So it's just beautifully done.
Ashley, what about your opinion on the art?
So, well, the first time I read it, I thought it was made way earlier. Like I thought it was made in like the 50s, and then I show up for class, and my teacher was like 1978. I was like, oh wow,
that sepia kind of makes it that kind of ages the
way.
look.
And I was like, graphic novels. I was like, these things have been around forever, but they haven't.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought it was made like in the 50s or
like
60s.
way older.
Yeah.
And then so the other thing is like he did a little character design class when he was drawn on the acetate.
God, that's crazy.
And I just remember him because I thought it was sort of like simple the way he did it, but now there's like such a genius to it because it was Will Eisner. But he's like, okay, we're gonna draw a bad guy.
Say it the right way.
And he was like, okay, what's a scary animal? He goes, a snake. We're going to make him look like a snake. And so he draws the face and he goes, we're going to give him a big nose. And he's like, look at this neck. And he like gave the guy a long neck and he finished him and he goes, that's a bad guy.
Did you just draw me? Like, damn.
And just the way he was going about it, he's like, I make, my bad guys look like animals you don't like weasels and bulldogs and stuff like that. And I was like, wow, this is really like outdated, but he was so happy and he was like drawing all these crazy characters.
He gave Todd McFarlane a career.
Yeah.
Like all of Todd McFarlane's bad guys look like animals you don't want to mess with.
Yeah.
It's crazy to in retrospect, the initial release of this book, one, the sales weren't all that. They were actually kind of poor. And in part of it too, I read somewhere that he was telling the story that he would frequent this one bookstore to see how things were going, and this bookstore was telling him like, we don't know where to put this book.
Something called Barnes and Nobles.
They were like, we put this book in the humor section, and then people, it doesn't sell, or people are telling us
sure as shit won't.
Yeah. And then we also put it in the religious section, and then people are complaining about it.
There's titties in there.
There's cartoon boobies.
And I think
what about the children?
I think the punchline of the story was like they eventually just said, so now we just put it in the cellar because we just don't know where to fucking put it, right?
Fuck.
So I mean, the book didn't do well at all. It wasn't really until it started to get reprinted, and I think one of the bigger ones that reprinted it for him was in like '85. So 7 years afterwards by Kitchen Sink Press.
Good old Kitchen
They
Sink.
reprinted a lot of his stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, between that and then of course in 2001, DC Comics got the rights and started reprinting it. But it was actually around Kitchen Sink time that the popularity and the impact on Will Eisner's social status like helped him like big time. Like it wasn't until much later that people were like, oh wait, this is a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And
They were
then
reprinting the spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now,
then-
Bot, are you sure it wasn't his voice or his accent? Are you sure?
I'm sure
To
the
start.
voice and
Are
accent.
you positive?
It's part of it.
Am I wasting my time?
Well, so
part
the
of it.
rise in popularity helped lead him to work as a teacher at the School of Visual Arts in New York. Like, damn it. So I mean, but I feel like I've heard that story so many times. Like, this masterpiece thing was so ahead of its time. Like, it took 7 years for us to catch up, right?
How many artists throughout history
yeah.
have had that sort of experience? Where, like
yeah.
Vincent Van Gogh was like
Oh, yeah.
shit on. He literally, like I think a small
painting
child was
his
like,
whole career.
like take this, Van Gogh, you
Yeah.
piece of shit. I think that's an actual quote. That's an actual quote. I
yeah,
heard
100%.
from a book, and he was like, fuck you, boy, with the poop in my eye. No, but the idea that an artist is never really appreciated
their
until
time.
later,
Yeah.
right? It's crazy to think about. Thankfully, like he lived long enough to see, like, basically, I don't know. Like Bonner and I were kind of talking about this, how like Will Eisner kind of did a lot of the same shit Stan Lee did, just didn't get the fame for it.
Yeah.
Because he was that one guy. He was that guy that was the influencer and not the entertainer. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's always those people in music, art, whatever, that like always do it first, right? Like Little Richard fucking creates rock and roll, and then Elvis gets the credit for it,
Yeah.
right? And that's not a slight. That's a terrible example because fucking Elvis did some really shitty things. Not that Stan didn't, but
Yeah.
Stan's legacy is a little less tarnished than fucking
Yeah.
Elvis Presley.
Yeah.
Okay, but they were contemporaries. They knew each other.
Yeah, but he kind of was. He had that big break though when he was doing the educational stuff.
Sure.
He
Well, I
wasn't-
mean, that's what he liked.
Yeah,
right?
and then he didn't kind of get. He wasn't in that kind of boom, that 80s 90s boom of comics.
Right.
Yeah.
So he kind of just he laid like a lot of the groundwork, but he wasn't working in the genre that exploded like the superhero stuff.
And he also didn't. I mean, Stan had the back. I mean, it wasn't Stan's money that he was putting up. Stan had it. You know, it was his uncle, right? His Martin Goodman. Like
He's
he
a made
had,
man.
he had like financial backing.
Moral of the story, guys: don't fucking do art.
Yeah.
Give up your dreams. Sell out as fast as possible. Short box approved.
So I've got some personal commentary I wanted to share real quick concerning about this book.
Give up your dreams, short box. Shut up. Give up your dreams. Sell out.
Give us dreams.
I was actually really surprised. I don't, going in, I didn't know what to expect, but the sex in Contract with God and how he like approaches like incorporating, like sex in the book threw me off at first. And not to say it wasn't gratuitous. It wasn't like like disgusting. It moved the story along and it added like dimensions to the character. Like it was a storytelling vehicle. It wasn't just for hey, sex sells. Let's throw it in there.
No, like it's done very tastefully.
Yes,
like it's not like it's like when all of those elements serve the character development, right? And that's something I've been fucking preaching till my eyes fall out. Is that character development is really important, especially in stories like this, especially comics and especially fantasy. This is like social realism, so it's like hyper stylized version of it, right? So like when you see the dude, when you see a man and a woman in an adulterous affair in the top part of like a loft or a barn where there's hay, and some guy is about to walk in on them, right?
Underage,
right? And there's that too, right? Like there's the weird pedophilia going on where it's like. Oh my God! Like this isn't like, hey, sex sells, huh? He's not drawing these people like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, like
no, it's like, not lecherous,
right? It's very like, no, this is what's happening in the story.
Well, this is
like this is they're fucking like it's not one way or the other,
and it was all done like. Because there's the characters, there's a lot of grays in these characters,
and they look real too. They look real people. That's what I like too.
Yeah. And all the it was done because it was part of a plan or a manipulation or a situation. It wasn't just like you said gratuitous,
right?
Just a show.
Right. Sarah saw that shit and she was like, "Hey, what are you reading?" Hey, like I felt really immediately embarrassed. Like I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
So we've kind of made comments about like how kind of somber and kind of sad this story is, and the mood it kind of put us in. I want to highlight the good too, and like the sense of like hope.
There's hope.
Yeah, plenty.
Hope and Contract with God.
And it doesn't lie in. And of course, it isn't a superhero story, but it doesn't lie in a one central heroic figure or someone with a cape. Like some of the kindest and like most heartfelt moments in this book came from like just neighbors being nice to other people, like just humanity, like the spotlight on like if we're all kind to each other. I don't know, like it was refreshing, I guess, to say the least.
Sure. And it's weird because Eisner really didn't associate too much with the religious side of his culture because he kind of had a bad experience with it growing up with a synagogue. But he was very proud of being Jewish. And a very big thing within Judaism is the whole try to make the world a better place for goodness sake, not for God's sake, right? So like just looking for other people and just realizing like, even Frim Hirsch at the end of his life, he didn't know it was the end of his life. Yeah. But towards the end of his life was like, I want to write a new contract with God. I hate where my life is right now. Maybe I can change it. Maybe I can do something. Works. I'm gonna go back to what I was before. Yeah. I married a shiksa. It didn't work out. Like she's like, you want I should be Jewish. That cracks me up, dude. Every time I read it, and he's just. It's funny because like she met him at a point in his life when he was like the fucking slumlord, and he was like, allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is Hove.
Well, like, he was that was like keeping up appearances,
right?
Like this is what.
But he comes from like a very strict sort of like Hasidic background where he's like, yo, I know the fucking religious side. I'm a damn mystic, Yeah. So he's like, I've somewhere I've fallen apart. And I need to get back to this. And then he ends up, dying. And you think, oh, that's the end. And Botter, you were talking about the epilogue of that story where, like, you see the Irish lady that lives in one of his slums. What was her name? It's like Mrs. Kelly, I think, or something like that. Because the way he writes her, it's like straight up like, oh, like it might as well be that kind of like, he writes in accents and stuff. Yeah. But it's like, like finally she got enough money to get something fixed, or there's another little boy.
That picks up the one he threw out,
and he's like, I'm gonna do my own contract with God because they're like, hey, fuck you, Jew, and like all that shit.
Yeah.
Like it's like
he's throwing rocks at us. Run, guys!
Right. So it's
He's fighting back.
all of that stuff is kind of like, it's like, yes, there's hope, but also life is kind of it's
cyclical.
It's a circle, right?
Yeah.
It's very cyclical, and we're all in this together. So unless we kind of try and help everybody out, it's going to be tough. Because you notice that From Hirsch is kind of by himself, right? Like he's in a community of people, and nobody helped him.
Yeah,
No, like of course they did, but it's like no one can I can't relate to a guy who's lost his daughter.
Yeah,
like I'm like
it's the whole like
here's a lasagna I made you.
Yeah,
like, I don't know what else to do.
Thoughts and prayers.
Right, like what do you do?
Like,
what do you do? Right?
Doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah. That guy's got to get over it on his own terms, and I think Eisner was pretty good at not only showing that through comics, but showing how, dude, he's basically J.O. Barr.
Yeah.
Do you remember J.O. Barr did initially do The Crow as a way of dealing with the death of his fiance? Like he was like, I got to fucking work this shit out. And God, there's something to that. Like Eisner did that, and I'm wondering like if artists who, I mean, that's nothing new, right, guys? No. Like artists basically working out their demons through their medium and just saying, I don't know how to express myself any other way except through what I was born to do. And I don't know if I was necessarily making this for entertainment value for somebody else, but if you get something from this, cool. This was my experiment in working it out.
But it's like the theme, though. It's it's the crisis of faith, where
Right.
that's a very common theme
For sure.
that people can relate to, despite
sure.
the cultural differences
Absolutely.
and things. So yeah,
I also want to mention, because, we spent a good time on the title story for good reasons, but some of the other stories in this, like the singer,
Oh God,
Kukeline
I
and-
love that one. Dude.
what was the other one? Now I
Yeah.
can't.
the super.
Oh, the super.
Oh, the
So-
super.
That's a
And this goes to maybe why I think this book is just, even though like there's we were talking about like the dated and like some of the other factors that might kind of separate it, but you can still kind of appreciate the fact that he's able to just look outside his window and like, because the super is based on like this story about like this mysterious kind of like eerie super I'm sorry,
It's German, right?
Custodian that he had in his tenement. The singer was based on like this homeless man that used to sing around like
Well, that was a real thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if anybody's been to New York, there's always those guys that come on the subway where they're like, "Excuse me, my brother is dying, and I just want to, play you guys a little song."
And then he was saying Kukeline might be his most also like another very personal one, because that one is about like him coming to age in a very like weird way as well.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime you see like where it's like the main character's name is Billy, you're like, "Ooh, I feel weird."
Actually, I think the name of like the two sons was Will, and then the other son was named after his brother. So like it was Will Eisner.
Yes, yeah.
And that last page of that story, Kukeline, where it's like I guess Will, right, was standing outside like his
mom's.
like,
Come on
and he's
in,
just kind of overlooking the city, but he's like really like stoic in it, man.
Yeah.
That was one of those like turn the page and you're like, oh shit, damn.
That's
Yeah. Ashley, do you want to say any closing remarks about Contract with God? Because we're about to get in on the spirit here in a little bit. You got anything else to say about Contract with God?
No, it was just such a. I think the word is an escalation. I think of just like the whole medium. I mean, he's the father of the graphic novel, and it's just it's so important. I don't know like how else to get that across, like what an important book that was.
This Spirit book has a little one of those like USA Today quotes, and it says the Citizen Kane comics, and I was like, oh, that's pretty fucking good.
Barter's like, "What the fuck is Citizen?"
Nah, I remember watching that.
I'm fucking with you. No, you watched the Freakazoid episode of Animaniacs.
yeah, that was
Wait, do you remember in Family Guy when they had
sled?
Remember in Family Guy when Peter like walks up? It's like they're showing a scene of Citizen Kane, and he walks up. He's like,
all the
Rosebud.
credibility we had as Will Eisner gone
Sorry,
out the
sorry.
window. I love it.
It's like Rosebud. It's the name of his sled. I just saved you 3 hours. Sorry, Ed. What about you? Closing remarks on Contract with God?
And it's like I said, it's a really powerful piece. I saw it at a probably too young an age to really appreciate it at first. It's like one of those things if you
Those
stumble,
titties!
Yeah, it's like, oh, boobs and what's going on? So it's I don't know. It's like I said, something I invested. I got the trilogy hardback, and it's something that's proudly on my shelf, and I think it's essential. And it's something that it's a challenge. It's not a casual, easy read for sure, but it's a challenge, and it's like we were saying before. I think it's
Great
just
payoff.
It's a portrait of Depression era America. That it's such a great way to see it and to read about it. So I think it has like historical significance as well as as far as literary and comic book just accolades. I think should be put as like a historical document at this point.
So you had anything else to add?
I think this came from the interview that you sent me, Botter, where Stan Lee and Will Eisner were talking. It's funny. It's like Ed was talking about how both those guys were in the room together. It made me laugh because there's an old Jewish saying that says, put 2 Jews in a room and you'll get 3 opinions. And it was kind of that way too. But also something else that was kind of cool about it was that you saw Stan Lee made kind of this point. And Stan the man, God damn it, he's fucking still inspiring even beyond the grave. He was still talking. He was talking about how Will Eisner elevated the medium of comics in a way when people use the analogy, it's like, well, if Michelangelo and William Shakespeare decided to work on a project together, would you look at it and be like, oh, but I don't want to read that because it's comics.
Yeah.
Or would you be like, shit, no, yeah, sign me up. I want to see that's interesting. I want to see what they're going to do. Like, Will Eisner was both of those guys. He was both Michelangelo and William Shakespeare. And I think that's where I stand, at least.
I do want to add that in addition to A Contract with God, he did produce 2 more sequels set in the same tenement, same time frame. I think just same universe, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
But A Life Force and Dropsie Avenue.
Yep.
Life Force for me was on a whole nother level, but that'd have to be another show. But man, it was just a great insight, man, into like the Jewish American identity, like through Will Eisner, and just a time period piece. Like, it was informative in so many ways, not just about like humanity and what it means to be human, but like just also like a glimpse into that being in that time frame, like being poor as shit and just like having to
being
kind of
poor
like,
and what it meant to be an American.
Right?
Yeah. And I mean, the same thing. It's the same reason why The Godfather is so good, right? Like Francis Ford Coppola painted pretty much the same picture in Godfather 2, where like Vito Corleone comes from, small town of Andolini to America, right? And he paints the Italian-American experience where it's like, oh man, these people suffered. Like a lot of people don't realize, like back in the day, like people were like, hey, Italians, they're the same as coloreds, like people were like, didn't give them respect at all,
Yeah.
And it was just kind of like everybody was in that same boat. And like, there's something very American about Will Eisner in that sense where you can look at it and be like, damn, this guy is a perfect portrait of what it was like back then. And it's not marred. It's not bitter. It's strong, and it still holds up.
Mm-hmm. Well said. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break and jump into the spirit part of his career. So we'll go ahead and play this little vignette, wonderfully produced by Cesar Cordero, and then we'll be back to talk a little bit about Spirit and some of his Will Eisner's earlier works. Stay tuned.
One of Eisner's more heroic creations crossed the line between the comic book and comic strip. Will Eisner created The Spirit in 1940. For 12 years, the original adventures of masked crime fighter Denny Colt appeared in newspapers and comic books across the United States.
Who is the Spirit? From his eerie headquarters under Wildwood Cemetery, masked criminologist Denny Colt, believed by many to be dead, secretly fights crime as the Spirit. From his home in Central City to the far-flung corners of the world and beyond, the Spirit attracts the most seductive and dangerous femme fatale. And wages a never-ending war against streetwise crooks, criminal masterminds, and otherworldly beings. With only quick wits, sharp humor, and his 2 gloved fists to aid him.
Hold it. Hold it. Who's the Spirit? You really want to know? Well, you ask the police, he's dead. You ask the criminal underworld. He's their worst nightmare. Now, you ask a couple dames around town, they'll give you the number to a shrink or two. Me? I'll just tell you I'm a poor stumblebum trying to shuffle my feet to paradise. Oh, and, stop these criminals here, too. Excuse me a moment.
So listen, here's the score. If we all meet up, say 3 hours from now, I think we can make this a sweet deal for everybody involved. Even, shall we say, people who, remain nameless.
You ain't talking about the octopus, are you?
Don't say his name out loud. Anyway, we should be fine. Nobody really knows about the score. Nobody really knows what we're doing here. Pretty sure it's gonna be a sweet deal. Simple snatch and grab.
Hey, wait a minute. You weren't actually thinking of robbing this bank, were you?
Oh, for crying out loud, it's the spirit. Get 'em, fellas.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hold these for me, will you, fellas? Well, it's a good thing I'm the kind of guy that likes pathos and violence in my comics.
Are you the kind of guy who doesn't call a girl back? You cheapskate?
Boy, it's a good thing she shot me in my face. Say, there isn't a fourth wall in the audio form of podcasting, is there? Well, if somebody's going to break it, the spirit is willing.
Yes, spirit, laugh. For when the octopus takes grip of this city, you will have no choice but to die. And though you never see me, I always see you. So says the octopus.
All right, Shortbox Nation. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed that audio vignette. Once again, that was done by Cesar Cordero.
I think we
Great
need to
job
dwell on
that.
how awesome it was. A
No,
little
she was
longer.
good.
A little longer.
You know,
A little longer.
It was really
Worth
good.
it.
Thank you.
It was really
Thank you,
good.
Ashley. Thank you.
Content drives the time frame, right?
Jesus.
That's how we do it here. So, like I had mentioned, this last part of this artist spotlight, we'll go into a little deep dive of Will Eisner's work on the spirit and some of his other works too. We'll find time to kind of touch on because I definitely want to touch on like his military service as well as like the Eisner Awards too, just a little bit. But I want to focus on Spirit. The Spirit was created in 1940. Actually, first appeared in June 2nd, 1940, as the main feature of a 16-page tabloid-sized newsprint comic book insert distributed in the Sunday edition of Register and Tribune syndicate newspapers. What is the Spirit? Well, the Spirit is a mass criminologist who went by Danny Cole. Believed to be dead by many people.
Dude, that's
yeah,
what's so I don't know if you got any kick out of this as much as I did. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, like, the Spirit's powers are that he got exposed to a chemical that made everybody think he was dead.
Well,
And then he just ends up like beyond the grave. Like, the only one that doesn't know, the only one that's in on it is the commissioner, right?
Commissioner Cole.
So he's like, I'm going to tell everybody, you know? And he's like, because he was like this. He was like the best way to describe the Spirit is like he was like Elliot Ness. He was like Elliot Ness, like one of the Untouchables, right? So like imagine a dude at that level of his police career where he's busting gangsters left and right. He is the scourge of the underworld, and then he ends up getting killed, right? Like on the job, killed in quotes, right?
Yeah.
So everybody's like, "Oh shit." Elliot Ness got murked. That's awesome. Great. Like everybody can like rest.
Breathe.
Like right. The criminal underworld can breathe easy. And now like the biggest threat against them is like gone. And Denny Colt decides, no, let me stay dead, and I'll destroy the underworld from inside out as the quote unquote the spirit. Right. But the idea is that now the backstory behind that is that newspapers were losing out on money because comic books were on the rise, right? And the pulps were they were just going away, period. Nobody wanted to, it's sad, nobody wanted to read anymore. they were losing to comic books, right? So newspapers were like, look, well, we need to get a comic book that's officially ours that we can sell in our, Sunday press or whatever. And they basically look at Will Eisner and they say, like, again, this is the interview that Botter sent me where it's when Will Eisner's telling the story. He was like, they were looking for costumed heroes. Yeah. They didn't call them superheroes back then.
Yeah.
They called them costumed heroes.
Yeah.
So they asked me, hey, do you have a costume hero? And I looked at the picture of the spirit I drew, and I was like, yeah, sure. So I drew a mask on him, and that's it. He has a costume. He's got gloves and a mask. That makes him a costumed hero. And I was like, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Like, it's because I always wondered, I'm like,
that was his compromise.
It's like, it's just a dude. It's just a dude with a fedora, a red tie, and like gloves and a mask. Like,
so I heard him described one of my favorite ways. He is the working man superhero.
He's a middle class superhero
because all of the crimes that he ends up solving or these villains, really, he's kind of like a bounty hunter too, because he did it for like a fee. Like, oh, how much is I'm just here to collect the reward money. Yeah, and real quick, because I ended up reading his origin story. And it was one of those like kind of kooky, like crazy, like wait, this is his origin.
But it's so tame too.
Yeah,
like,
it
it's
is.
like he gets exposed to like juice.
Yeah, it's so he
weird
as Danny
juice.
Cole, he's a criminologist, which I'm not really sure what that exactly means. But
he's CSI.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, okay.
But Commissioner Dolan is the only one that knows his secret identity.
Right.
He comes in. He's like, hey, I'm here to hunt down Dr. Cobra. Is that I'm definitely like extrapolating, but whatever. This is what we do on the short box.
I love it.
He's like, yo, is there still a bounty for Dr. Cobra? He finds Dr. Cobra. Dr. Cobra's doing some weird shit with some chemicals. They get into a fight. It splashes on his face, and it puts him in this suspended animation to where even the commissioner and what do you call the guy that studies dead people and tells you they're dead? I forget the name.
The mortician.
Mortician. Thank you.
Autopsy.
Mortician is like, yeah, he's definitely dead. Well, Danny Cole, picks himself up from the grave and is like, hey, actually, I'm not dead, but don't tell nobody because I'm just gonna wear this fucking mask.
Especially don't tell my wife and children.
Yeah.
Because
I'm
homie
over
wants
them.
to fuck.
Yeah. I'm over those guys.
Yeah. Which to me, man, like it's funny recapping it like this, but that is such a I don't know that is so unique and cool. Like his secret lair is underneath the cemetery that he was buried in.
Dude, metal's
That's fucking metal as shit, dude.
He's got no powers. I mean, he's got like what? He's in a fucking blue tuxedo. He's
Cemetery lair.
like, do you know how hard it is to move in a tux? Like,
Yeah, right.
like it is a bitch to move.
a lot of armor.
That is hilarious. I didn't even think about that till just now. Like, homeboy is in his fucking work clothes.
Yeah.
Like, trying to fight crime. Like, shit, I don't got
Very
mobility in this three-piece suit.
He's like he's kind of like aloof. He's like an adult. He's not like the baddest, like smoothest
He's Bruce
dude.
Campbell.
Yeah. He gets beat up a lot.
He's Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
Like, if they made a spirit, like,
Oh my
That'd
god,
be a great
like
one.
show,
yeah.
he would be great in like circa 1991. Like,
Yeah.
Army of Darkness Bruce Campbell is perfect to play the spirit.
Yeah.
He kind of played a character in that same time period in the Hudsucker Proxy. Like, he was at the newspaper that Jennifer Jason Leigh worked at. But it'd be great, like, just to sort of like, my name is Ash and I'm a slave. Like, that sort of thing, like, just crazy.
And of course, I mean,
He's a doofus.
It's basically a noir comic book. So I mean, he's going against like streetwise crooks, there's criminal masterminds, plenty of awesome femme fatales. There's even like sometimes like otherworldly beings, but.
Dude, when you sent me that picture of Sans Serif, like, pulling the gun out, you were like, yo, Potter's
She's so
always got a thing
badass, dude.
for, like, girls that want to step on dudes' necks.
Wow.
And there's so many, there's so many to choose from.
He
And
loves
it's-
the bad girls.
What's the
He
safe
loves
word?
The bad girls. Potter's like, yeah, step on my testicle real quick.
So let me get some of this historical stuff out the way. The Spirit ran for 12 years, from 1940 to 1952, and I think Cesar had mentioned, or Ed, one of you guys mentioned it, but at this time it was like comic books were being published by studios that would sell them to newspapers. So it was like a package deal. They had just buy the comics from us. Don't worry about hiring writers, editors.
Don't
blah,
worry
blah, blah.
about it. Don't worry
Right?
about it.
Man, there's nothing to do in Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Did somebody say there's nothing to Duval in Jacksonville?
Danny Duval, what are you doing here?
Your ignorance summoned me. Now shut up and listen to these words. North Florida's premier anime, comic book, sci-fi, and pop culture event, Collective Con, returns for its 6th year. On March 20th through the 22nd, stars from The Mandalorian, Game of Thrones, Supernatural, The Crow, Dragon Ball Z, and even famous Pokemon card illustrator Mitsuhiro Arita is flying in from Japan to join in on the fun.
Wow! That sounds awesome!
Why are you still standing here? Go buy your tickets today at CollectiveCon.com, you lovable Nimrods!
So I mean, Spirit made its debut in this Register and Tribune syndicate, but it was also, by the time it was done, carried by over 20 Sunday newspapers, and I think with the combined circulation, it was like reaching up to 5 million, readers. Or there was like 5 million copies every year, which is.
Can you imagine being
interesting.
that guy in the room where everybody in the business is looking at you like, yo, fuck you, dude. You're fucking scooping out from everybody.
So
you're talented. You're fucking nailing these every week.
The Spirit had its own. It was called the Spirit section, right? Like,
it was like a little insert.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And it had like 2 backup stories too. Lady Luck and I forget the name of the other one, but Spirit was like the main one or whatnot. And just some background as far as to kind of add to Cesar's story. Will Eisner at the time was doing really good at his studio, Eisner and Iger. I mean, it was the same premise. Like, hey, we just produce comic books, we sell them to whoever wants to buy them.
They were outsourcing. Basically.
Yes, basically. And then that's when his business partner, Everett Busy Arnold, approached him and said, hey, there's money made for these comic books. I've got a newspaper that wants one. How would you like to, make one for yourself, or make one, or get into business together? And Eisner was saying, like, well, I didn't really need to, because I was making, what he said, he was like, me and my partner Iger were splitting like $20,000 a year.
In that
20
time
grand,
period.
Yes.
In that time period, $20,000 a year.
And I did some
Holy
math,
moly.
because he was saying they made about $1.50 a page, a profit.
Yeah.
Well, with inflation in 2019, that'd be close to $26, $27 a page. That's like some fucking great money.
Yeah.
So but Will Eisner, once again, how we talked about the contract with God and his motivation.
What year was this?
1939. Yes, it comes out about $27. But Will Eisner was so fascinated with the idea to, one, create something original, two, I think he even goes on to say, like, this was my opportunity to reach an adult audience. So he ends up selling his half of his studio to Iger, I think for like $20,000 or something.
So
like that.
$20,000 back then.
Oh yeah.
The equivalent was $358,000. $904. That's crazy.
And this is like Depression era, probably
1939, like post-Depression
Yeah,
era,
post-Depression.
like right before World War II is happening right now.
Yeah.
The baby boom is yet to occur.
Yeah. The interesting thing though is early negotiations, and this is what that business acumen, man. Will Eisner, as part of the contract, kept his rights to the character. Like
Unheard
they could
of.
not, like what he said. Arnold agreed it was my property. Like if we should ever split, it reverts back to me on the day that it happens. Like and his Busy Arnold and his family were cool with it, including the backups, Miss Mystic and Lady Luck. Yeah, that's unheard. Like, do you know how many times have we done an artist spotlight where the writer or the artist that we're talking about had no fucking money to be made from like their creations? And you got Will Eisner getting the opportunity to sell an original, character to, whatever.
He was the Todd
many
McFarlane
newspapers.
of his time,
Man.
except he just didn't have that shit talking mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe he did. Who knows? I wasn't around then. Maybe he was like, "Yeah, you guys would be doing a lot better if you put out better artwork." Oh, burn, wicked burn! Go fuck yourselves.
And to add to because Will Eisner saw this opportunity to
Eisner's house, bitch.
He saw this opportunity to like reach an adult audience. He even goes on to say that when he started getting the idea for a contract with God and the idea to like really take this medium to the next level, it was like towards the end of the Spirit, so closer to like 1950, 52, that he started incorporating different storytelling elements into it. And I think it goes back to my point about when it comes to years and Will Eisner, they're very important because like certain years he was trying different stuff, and anything that led up to like his big releases, you could see that in earlier works. So actually, have you had a chance to read any Spirit stuff or an Ed too?
I read a Spirit Mask crossover just because I had it in my library.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I've not really gotten into it because I don't know. I mean, now that we're talking about it, like now I want to read it.
Good, because
It's so
I
fun.
promise you, like there was very little motivation for me too to be like into it. Like I was kind of like, I mean, I don't know. Like I appreciate the man's art.
Yeah.
You know? Like, but I mean, am I gonna get anything out of these stories? And like, if you just grab any one of those books, one, they're really self-contained and really short because they were in a newspaper, right?
Yeah.
So when you read them, you're like, oh shit, well it's done. And like, no one can tell you that you haven't had the proper Spirit experience, because the proper Spirit experience is basically you take the paper, you open it up, you read your fucking news, and then you read the Spirit, and that's done. That's what all it is. Like anybody else is, yes, a fanatic, but no fanatic can tell you you're any less of a Will Eisner fan for not liking every Spirit story. Like there's a lot of cool stories, but if you just freaking put a fucking Spirit graphic novel in your toilet, and whenever you decide to drop a deuce, just read a story, it's like for real, like you are caught up. And it's worth it because they're fun, they're silly, they are suspenseful, and there's like cool crime stuff, and the artwork is crazy good. What goes without saying.
Insanely good. Ed, what are your experience with Spirit?
For the original Spirit, I've mostly, I haven't say I have sat down and read like a story, but I've looked at a million pages, especially like the splash pages and stuff, and what he does, like the layouts and just how dynamic his layouts are. But I can't say I really sat down and read too many stories, but I have read like some of the Darwin Cook Spirit series that came out a few years ago. But yeah, it's like I said, it's something that's on my list to get because I know it's really easy, bite-sized things. But I've looked at it more just from visual, just to from like an art standpoint more than actual. As a comic, as a story.
Like I said, I ended up buying this best of Spirit. So I mean, it was kind of a cheat code for me. I just wanted to see like what was the best of. And there's a few in here that you can definitely see like the early kind of contract with God like influences. Like I think he even says like his one Will Eisner's personal favorite stories is this one called The Story of Garage Schnabel. And a personal favorite of mine, the story of Rat Tat, the toy machine gun, and it's about a toy machine gun called Rat Tat, which was pretty interesting. To also and like when you read these stories, I mean they're definitely going to be dated. It doesn't take away from the quality of it, but you've got to kind of keep that lens of like they were doing this in like the 1940s. So think about like them doing this now and like how many of these similar stories you've seen throughout the years. And it's like you can point at Will Eisner and the Spirit as being like the source.
And that's the thing too. You have to, like you said, you have to observe this in its time because
big time.
Because we've seen like the Disney Plus stuff where they have the disclaimers now for like the racial stereotypes, and and he's not, but it's not like. When you look at someone's work, it's not like that's the only person doing it. You have to look at the whole.
Are we going into it?
We can.
Are we going to talk about Ebony White?
We can.
I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I want to talk about it.
I'm ready to talk about it. I'm ready to talk about it.
So, I mean, give us some background about Ebony White.
Okay, so the Spirit has a little sidekick, and his name is Ebony White, and that's supposed to be a racial pun. And the sidekick is very much intentionally drawn as sort of like the Negro pickaninny, basically is what was the inspiration, right? And and it's funny, much like today, like mostly the people that get offended aren't the targeted or the people that in most other people's eyes would be getting offended. Like when Eisner created this, and even towards the end of his life, he didn't really receive too much flack from like black people for Ebony White. Like everybody else was like up in arms. Like everybody was like, "How dare you?
There's a lot of
dare you
virtue
portray
signaling going on
for sure."
Yeah.
And it was basically, and it was funny because a lot of black dudes, like Sam Jackson of all people, Sam Jackson was in the movie The Spirit as the octopus. Like he loves Will Eisner's work. Do you think he gives a shit about Ebony White? No, because he realizes one. Will Eisner drew everybody fucked up.
Yeah.
Like, and it goes for Jewish people too. Like, he drew like Jewish people with like fucking huge noses and like every stereotypical thing. But Eisner himself said, what are you going to say, Bonner?
No, I was going to say, just to add to your point, Ebony White wasn't like treated badly neither. Like he
Right.
was just like the sidekick that drove the car. Like he would say some like stereotypical shit.
Some of the speech.
The speech was like super dated. But
Well, Eisner said it himself. He was like, guys, that was what was funny back in the day.
Yeah.
And by the way, humor wasn't in big, it wasn't a big thing during the Depression. It's not like we had a lot to laugh about.
Yeah.
But when you're in New York, a lot of comedy comes from just making fun of people. That's pretty much our bread and butter here at the Short Box Podcast. How often have I made fun of Botter's speech patterns or him mispronouncing a name, right? Or fucking how often has everybody come down on me for being...
That's like crying.
Nice.
How many times?
But we all bust on each other and whatever, right?
yeah.
Someone in the future might be like, "Oh, I can't believe they would do that or say that. But it's like, humor is such a weird thing. And in Depression era New York, if it's not mean-spirited and everybody's in on it,
That's the thing.
it
it's
doesn't
the intent,
matter.
The
right?
intention of the character.
Like everybody's in on it, not just like,
Yeah.
Will Eisner saying that. Let's also not forget, he brings up a good point. Like Charles Dickens doesn't really get flack for portraying Fagin the Jew in one of his, I want to say it's in, God, this is killing me. Oliver Twist?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He had the gang of kids.
Right. It's like he's very much a stereotype, and Charles Dickens made money off of that character.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's one of the main characters in the story. Where like Ebony White isn't really a main character in the story, and Eisner's like, I'm not really making money off of him. I'm making money off the spirit.
Yeah.
And even then, even at the end of his life, like Eisner was kind of like, I feel weird about it, but then he's like, but I'm not apologetic.
Yeah.
Because back in the day we didn't have much to laugh at except each other, and that's the way that worked. So get off my balls.
Speaking about
Direct quote.
kind of like
Direct quote from Will.
get off my balls. Hashtag Will Eisner.
Get off my balls. He's from Brooklyn. You know, at least one time. At one time he said something like that. Come on.
Real quick, do you know how happy I am to add like Will Eisner to my like list of Brooklyn greats? Biggie, Jay-Z, Will Eisner.
Oh man.
Yes, everybody knows
that's
there's
hot.
nothing more intimidating than a small Jewish man.
So I will give props to the spirit. I mean, we made a joke, but the way he portrays women in this is fucking awesome. Like they're all badass.
Are we done with Ebony White?
And was there any more to say? I feel like you that was a mic drop.
Just you
Get
tell
off
me.
my balls. No, that was good. That was good. I'm good. Ebony White all day.
I mean, we got a black guy on the show here. I mean,
No, I was cool with Ebony White. It threw me off when I first seen him on the show. I was like, oh shit, what the fuck? And I was like, damn, it's very, very caricature, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't be mad about that because then I'd have to be mad about how he draws all the other characters.
Yeah.
Right.
It just threw me off. I was like, oh shit, okay. Well, yeah, this kind of makes sense. It was like fucking 1940, you know? Like,
right.
Yeah, they were all
That's the
drawing
thing
characters.
that people don't get.
It's just,
it's-
people tend to look at things with like these weird sort of stained glass sunglasses, right?
Yeah.
Like this sort of like sterilized eyeglasses. You can't look at the past with sterilized lenses. It doesn't make sense.
These femme fatales, though,
Oh shit!
they're drawn exceptionally beautiful. Like,
Calm down.
Oh my god.
all bad, like
Relax.
silks,
Hands above the
satin,
table, please.
Pagel,
Okay,
like,
so in my little skit,
yeah.
Sarah's character is Pagel.
Oh, sweet.
That's who she's supposed to be. I didn't name drop her, but I was like,
Like when they show up in the stories, to me, they steal the show because they're just so interesting and badass. And then you've got like the spirit kind of like aloof and kind of
that's
dopey,
like his
you know?
like I was watching an interview and he's like that's the type of women he likes. He likes strong, just no nonsense. He likes that in the personality trait.
It's funny that the spirit is such a doof around them. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that's kind of like how Will Eisner was like back in the day. Like his appeal wasn't the, hey, I'm a tough guy. It was like self-deprecating, kind of like,
Yeah.
I guess I'm a nerd, whatever.
One of my favorite stories when it comes to the spirit is Will Eisner got him off the ground, but at a certain point he kind of did like like many others, like he had his studio of uncredited artists and writers. Like he would just kind of go manage the story.
McFarlane.
Yeah. Stanley, all of that good stuff.
Step back
right?
from Spawn
Yeah.
and let Greg Capullo and Angel Medina.
And I
run
think
it.
some of the names we listed were like Wally Wood,
Jack Cole.
yeah.
like some of these like unspoken greats. Unless like you are really into the comic book culture, you know them.
Yeah,
but
and you can kind of recognize the style if
sure,
you
for
studied
sure.
a lot of them. So
So, I mean, but when he got drafted for the war in 1941, he had such trust and faith in his team that he let them ghost for him. So like, hey, continue the operation as it should. Put my name on it. You guys run with it. I'll be back.
I got to fight the Krauts, guys. Could you guys just look over the shop for me?
And then once again, kind of talking about the importance of dates.
God damn it, Butter. I wish you would trust us that way. I wish you would so much.
In 1945,
Butter's like, fuck yeah.
This will be deleted. Mark time.
Edit it out.
well, in 1945, when he gets back, he kind of says, hey, guys, I'm going to go and handle everything on my own for a little bit. And that is considered some of the most, at least like some of his best spirit work is like the post-war spirit. And as a matter of fact, it was so like important that, a couple of these reprints, like DC has put out like the post-war spirit stuff. Yeah. Because that's when you saw him like really start to
people were
experiment.
Fucking. What?
Yes.
What happened?
So we had a conversation prior to hitting record about the art style and spirit, and I think Ed, you came in, you were like, Eric Powell wouldn't have a job without.
We were
spirit,
saying that,
like right?
No,
Ed and I were talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because like a lot of especially like the facials he does and the detail and even the design.
Yeah,
the overall
character design for sure. And I was speaking, shocker to all of our regular listeners, C was speaking in hyperbole. Right? Yeah. But
hyperbole.
in the sense that Eric Powell definitely is a Will Eisner fan. And if you really dig Eric Powell's work, it would behoove you to get into Will Eisner just because...
thematically completely different.
Yeah.
But,
No, for sure.
Visually
you get the same sort of like itch that gets scratched,
I'll go ahead and add another name that I see a very direct influence, because this was one thing about
Joan Rivers.
But like every single like opening splash page of the Spirit, like what he does with the title and like the different like like C's point, like the opening page should be like, hey, here's the writer, here's the artist, here's where we're at. Like the way Will Eisner just kind of structured everything, I see like a big influence on Jim Steranko. Like Steranko likes to play around with the titles.
Even Perez too.
Yeah. So I mean, it's once again looking at the lens of like 1940s golden age comic books to see him do all him and his studio.
It's street
do
art,
these techniques, man. Yeah, it's fantastic. Like I said, I didn't think I was going to get around to this the Best of Spirit book. I was just content like just reading on Will Eisner and Contract with God. But I started one story, and I swear I just could not stop because they're really digestible. Like anthology stories, they're either. I mean, every story has like this little box: action, mystery, adventure. You get that in spades, man.
Yeah, I would say, and I guess a contemporary version of it. Maybe one of the closer things I can think of is Black Sad.
Yeah.
Like if you really dig Black Sad, I would say jump in the Spirit because it's that same sort of feel where like. Yeah, it's a detective story, but also it's kind of not goofy, but like it's lighthearted, right? Like the way Black Sad, you're like, shit, this is a hard-boiled crime story.
Yeah, it's like
people
a
are
noir
dead,
light,
but it's with anthropomorphic animals, where you're like, oh yeah, okay. So the Spirit is kind of that same way, where it's like, oh shit, this is a hard-boiled crime story, but the backstory is that they needed a superhero comic for a newspaper to freaking scoop out everybody else. So just put a domino mask on a regular doof and
hire a guy that didn't really didn't care for a superhero,
right? And have him draw some like really like badass chicks who shoot him in the head and he's fine the next fucking issue.
I just want to know what they never explain. They don't explain like what that liquid was.
No, they don't need to because it's not important.
Yeah.
Like it's like the story is as it's the characters, right? Like it's like
it's week to week, temporary. It's like you're gone next.
Like, man, you really get like.
You never see the octopus's face.
Yeah. Which is like, I thought that was just, maybe in this book that I didn't see him, but it's like, no, that's been like a trope they've carried on. Yeah. Like you just don't ever see this.
Fucking gloves. He's always beating the shit out of the Spirit, like always. Like all you see are these hands behind a curtain, like with my God, the hugest wrench I've ever seen in my life. The dude would die. Like any normal man would have like 5 concussions and like blood, like a gaping head wound. And the Spirit is fine. Like the next panel, like, gee golly, like, owie, that hurt. Like,
he got beat up a lot for a superhero.
Yeah.
It's almost like the Blade of the Immortal, where he's invincible, so he just gets chopped up all the time and sucks at fighting.
I guess
Gets healed up.
to Ed's point, I guess that's why they made him have like that weird healing factor in the movie, right?
Yeah.
Because how else would you explain? I think asking people to accept Looney Tunes,
about that.
yeah, asking individuals to accept Looney Tune logic in their movies would be like, all right, this character's. I'm already sitting in the theater with popcorn and I don't know anything about this guy, and now you're going to tell me that Sam Jackson just shot him in the face and he's fine like 5 minutes from now. How? Well, because it's the spirit. You know, you can't say that. You got to be like, well, he's got a fucking healing factor and blah blah. I'm like, all right, I see why. I see why.
Yes,
I get it. I get it.
I'll go ahead and close out this spirit with my final thoughts. Between the spirit, well, really a lot to do with the spirit and knowing, like, sorry, some of the uncredited artists and writers and people involved. It has made me think, what else am I missing from the golden age of comics? Like, how much it definitely put a spotlight on how important that was for laying the groundwork of, like, you know, the silver age and the things that I really got into. And it makes me want to do like my homework a lot more.
You know what this is, Spotter. You know what this is.
Oh God, here we go.
If you get into the spirit, you're basically getting into the Dark Horse and the Oni Press and an image of its time.
Oni Press, goodness
because
gracious.
fucking Batman and Superman existed back then. They did. But the spirit, that's for the fucking OG. You're turning.
So that's what I'll say, man. Is I think between the spirit, contract with God, I think Will Eisner encapsulates like what we love about comic books.
Yeah,
and,
fuck
like,
bitches, get money. Yo, that's what's
Brooklyn. Ashley, you got any closing remarks about the spirit or just Will Eisner in general?
I mean, he's just a legend. Like I feel like thinking back about like artist spotlights, like he should have been the first one.
All right, Ashley, jeez, I'm sorry.
wow.
I'm sorry.
That was awesome.
I'm the first one.
Ashley Laney, hoy. Damn,
I've been saying this for years.
guys. I don't know
Jack
if you know
Kirby
this
was
or
our
not.
first one. I feel like I was still good.
But I mean, he worked for Will
No,
Eisner.
I will admit
met the man. Thank you.
I will. That's funny. I will admit, reading it, doing all of this, I was like, yeah, this should have been a lot sooner. You got it. You got it. Anything else?
That's all.
Spotter's like, anything else?
Don't ever tell me.
I'm about
Mute.
to edit all of this.
What was that timestamp again?
Don't ever take sides against the family again, Fredo.
See, what about you?
What about me?
Closing remarks on Spirit?
I got nothing, man. Like we
Spent.
said everything, man.
Yo.
The man is a legend in the business to this day. Like you can't not be touched by Eisner in some way as far as comics are concerned, right? Like and even if you don't know who he is or what he's done, you have seen on the back of comics, especially in fucking Gerard Way's Umbrella Academy, it'll say like really small letters at the back, Eisner winner of the year, right? For that year. Someone would be like, Eisner winner, what is that? Like someone would be like, oh, well, that's the O. Henry Award for like people who are like, you know, in comics. And it's like, oh, okay. Who's Eisner? Who is this guy? And then, you know, that's enough. That's enough for people to like look into it. And then all it would take is for somebody to see one of his like pieces of artwork and they would be like, whoa,
Yeah.
this dude's from when? Holy shit. Like if anything, like again, like if you like Eric Powell, he's as good as Eric Powell is now in the fucking 50s.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think about.
And he has like that style is really timeless too.
Yeah.
It's like you look at it, it can be from any era.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Ed, what about you?
Well, it's funny because he's like, I consider him, you know, he's one of the architect of comics who's not known for superheroes.
Right.
You know, which every other one I would think of, you know, they're tied to that superhero world that's
Sure.
blown up so much, but this is the guy that laid a lot of that groundwork. Not really known for superheroes.
Yeah.
And actually didn't really. He was more looking at film and theater
And
you know, his
real
influences
life.
and
Yeah.
pulp influences.
Right,
It's,
right.
You know, so his name's out. It's hard to say he doesn't get the credit because, you know, Eisner Awards, but I think a lot of people don't look past that and they don't dig deeper and see the real impact he had as far as even just, like you said, getting the rights to his character at that time when everything was work for hire.
Right.
Incredible. Like that foresight to have that.
Yeah.
He's
Hopefully after this episode, people will.
Yeah.
He's on my mount. Like he's, I think, leading on the Mount Rushmore of comic books.
Oh, sure.
He's like
icons.
slightly like of the people that I grew up like, you know, Kirby. He's like kind of slightly a little half a generation ahead of them. you know?
Right. It's a timing thing.
Yeah.
Well said. Well, folks, hopefully you guys enjoyed this artist spotlight. We pride ourselves in putting our best foot forward for these episodes, so they tend to run a little long, but especially when you consider like everything Will Eisner's done and things that we haven't even touched on. I mean, there was a really good period of like his military life that he contributed still to comic books. As well as like I wanted to talk about the Eisner award stuff too, but I think we'll probably save that for a bonus episode as well on our Patreon. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I want to go ahead and invite anyone that's listening, if you've got a personal story or something you want to share about Will Eisner and his memory, feel free to shoot us an email at theshortboxjacks@gmail.com, or if you want to champion something by Will Eisner that's probably your personal favorite, we'd love to hear from you guys.
Absolutely.
You could also leave a short voicemail at 904-580-4095. As far as next artist spotlights, that voting will be available on Patreon for our True Believer tier. I think me and C were talking about maybe doing something like international. So pick a few international artists like Mobius. I think we had Frank Vazetta on that list.
Oh yeah,
and I can't think of like the other. We had like two others. I just kind of
Frank Miller too. We haven't done a Frank Miller one, believe it or not.
That's right. So we will have that voting ballot up here on Patreon here in a little bit. And speaking of Patreon, our last patrons only gift of 2019 is available in sweet pog form.
Yeah.
All illustrated by Ashley, our very own Ashley, showcasing the pet Avengers of the short box. I have never wanted an actual pet more in my life.
You got the plastic jellyfish though.
Yeah, I know. But my house plants, I represent. But no, they're awesome pogs, and they're free to our there's two tier Patreon levels. I can't think about it right now, but they're free to our patrons. And if you want to sign up to become a Shortbox patron and cash in on our next Patreon gift, that'll be out sometime in March. We do one a quarter, so
yeah, that's kind of our philosophy, right? When you become a patron, it's not like you're giving us cash; you're cashing in. That's the idea, right? You're cashing in on everything that we have to offer.
Right there, baby.
That's the whole. But seriously, right? Am I wrong? Like that's kind of the point, right?
You get a gift every quarter. You get bonus episodes. We got exclusive merch and commercial-free episodes.
We wouldn't have done this or tried to do anything regarding Patreon if we didn't feel that the patrons would be cashing in on some sort of service that we could provide and some cool ass art, man. Like how many other fucking podcasts can you say in Jacksonville? Or anywhere else, I challenge.
Or like what other podcast can you say in Jacksonville and Riverside?
In Jacksonville,
give you free art.
We'll give you fucking pogs.
Name two.
Hey, real quick.
I challenge nationally. Who the fuck is giving pogs out nationally?
He's right. He's
Pogs.
He's really right.
Who the fuck is doing it? Nobody.
Patreon.com/theshortbox.
Fuck bitches get pogs.
Yeah, Brooklyn. I wanted to I had a note from like one of these last episodes. It was It was thanking everyone for showing up for the
and for our ladies, fuck Mitches get pogs.
Yeah. But I had a note that said, shout out everyone that showed up to TEDx event, and then as like my little joke was, what other podcast do you know hosts a TEDx event and then clowns on one of the hosts? When you started making fun of Ryan, dude, I was like, this is the most short box panel in the world.
What did I say? He looked like Chubby John Legend?
Yeah,
he does.
That's not
even accurate. He just made fun of me and it made me feel bad. I was like, how dare you hurt my feelings? You're my friend.
And like all professionalism went out the window. So he walked on to the stage and said, well, you look like a Chubby John Legend. And in my head, I was like, only at a short box TEDx event do you see this.
Yeah, only the short box would treat something as awesome as TEDx the way Nelson from The Simpsons would treat Bart. Shout out, Butter Darkness. That was for you, baby. I love you.
Yeah. And we got one last Ryan jab in before 2020.
That's all we ask, man.
Speaking of which, man, Happy New Year to all of you guys listening to all of our Shortbox Nation, friends, families, patrons, and all that good stuff. We'll catch everyone probably second week of January. We're going to take a nice break. We've done a lot of work this year that we're definitely all proud of. So we're definitely going to take some time off.
Yeah, man.
But we'll be back that second week of January with all new episodes. In the meantime, check out some of the episodes that we highlighted or that you might have missed, man. Like I said, we've done over damn near 43 general release episodes as well as 27 like Patreon episodes just this year. So there's plenty content for you guys to catch up on if you aren't listening on a weekly basis. And I'll go ahead and sign out by saying thank you guys so much for listening.
Can we put like the Saturday Night Live music at the end where it's like
Start waving.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, I like that. We're going to go ahead and close out with a new song by Shortbox alumni, good friend, The Black Toilet, off his latest EP. I know.
Why you gotta say it like that?
Because it's like I mentioned that to.
Set it up better. You know we're gonna make fun of you.
No, I know. I was expecting you guys to be like, "Whoa, wait, what?" Like,
he's been on the show.
No, he has, and he's fucking awesome. Like he is like my favorite like local rapper.
He's
like
hilarious.
Straight up. Yeah, he's
very funny.
Man, he is.
He puts all the competition in the fucking gun.
But he went ahead and sent me this new song. It's called Smooth Motel. It's off his latest EP. It dropped on Christmas, called Thank You. And it's also available on most music streaming platforms. So
Nice.
we'll play that to sign us out. And once again, man, don't let this be your last episode. Catch you again.
Yeah. Happy
in our
New
next
Year.
one. Happy New
Have
Year.
a good holidays, and we'll see you next year, guys.
Yeah.
It's no big deal, yeah. Welcome to the Smooth Motel. We gonna kick it off like this. Thank you for coming out. Waking up with my eyes closed, walking slow-mo. We should go throw all the profits in the pockets, bite the rocket, blow up, bro. What you wanna know? I'll tell you all the secrets, and the feeling is peaking. I'm searching for the reason that you leaving. But never mind, I'd rather call when the season is sunny and the people are running for the shade. I feel played, ace of spades. Why are you the renegade? Now tell me all your pain, now let's trade. Matter of fact, I'll save it for the bank. What they say will never remain stuck on my brain, so I'll remain sane. You can lose yours, mains. I'd rather hydroplane into a train than to let you change my mood, man. These mood swings never remove the true thing like you saying. Running a game, no shoestrings, don't do the same. Be yourself, stay in your lane. I feel plain, blend. Walking the dark marks in the sand. My whole crew walking down that street like I'm watching band down.